some of the most important announcements that I would like to make for the next 3 days. We have exclusive spotlight sessions planned for you all across the 3 days. They are an embodiment of our central theme, sustainable disruption. Today's spotlight session is futurist Matthew Griffin and award-winning actress and climate warrior Bhumi Pednekar. Tomorrow we have an action-packed day as we begin the day with an AI specialist all the way from UK, Professor Sana Karegani. Our motivational session with CDR Abhilash Tomi, and wrap-up of the evening with the much-awaited INFOCOM Changemakers Award, followed by a musical night. Finally, on Saturday, we have an exciting session with the mental illusionist Roy Zaltzman and our valedictorian session with the inspirational Srikant Bolla. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, guests present here, you can see that we are an action-packed INFOCOM this year of INFOCOM Calcutta 2024. Once again, a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen and participants here today. On behalf of the ABP Group, I, Teenat Atifa Masood, would like to welcome all of you to the 23rd edition of INFOCOM, India's top business technology leadership conference, bringing together one of the largest congregations of ICT professionals, corporate leaders, academics, visionaries, and policymakers in the country. INFOCOM, the annual Information and Communication Technology Exposition, was initiated in 2002, and over the last 22 editions of the event has emerged to be one of the largest platforms in the country. This will be a 3-day conference, an initiative to bring together the best minds in business and technology and help initiate discussions on key growth areas enabled with cutting-edge technologies, challenges, latest trends and developments, so that there can be a scope for driving growth through collaboration. In an era of rapid technological advancement, the interplay between innovation and sustainability is more critical than ever. INFOCOM 2024's theme, Sustainable Disruption, highlights the urgent need to balance transformative innovation with responsible practices that ensure long-term growth and environmental stewardship. Disruption has long been the driver of progress, as we all know, challenging norms, creating new markets, and redefining industries. However, in the pursuit of progress, it is imperative to align innovation with principles of sustainability. Sustainable disruption emphasizes creating solutions that not only drive efficiency and profitability, but also minimize environmental impact, foster social equity, and promote ethical governance. At INFOCOM 2024, we bring together visionaries, policymakers, and business leaders to explore actionable insights, share success stories, and catalyze meaningful change. Let us unite, ladies and gentlemen, to build a future where disruption drives sustainability and sustainability amplifies progress. I would now like to invite Mr. Dhruva Mukherjee, CEO of ABP Group, to kindly come forward to present the welcome address. Sir, a very good morning to you, and the stage is yours.
Hello, check. Thank you, sir. Working? Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Tinath, and very good morning to all of you. A very, very warm welcome to INFOCOM 2025. As Tinath said, this is going to be our 23rd edition of INFOCOM. And I think 23 years back when we started, a lot of people laughed at us because they thought an IT and ITES event in Calcutta. They said, you guys are fools, you guys are dreamers, it's an impossible dream. But what's life without chasing dreams, right? And after 23 years, here we are. It's probably one of the longest running event in the city of Calcutta, if not in the country. And that's only been possible because of the amazing support that you guys have given, your organizations have given, that we have been able to build it from strength to strength and make it bigger, better in scale, size, and impact every year. This year, Tinath introduced the theme, sustainable disruption. And I think when we were crystallizing the theme, I asked an IT colleague of mine, give me an example of sustainable disruption. And the person said, Dhruvo, marriage is a sustainable disruption. And not exactly the example I was looking for from him. I turned to another person who was standing next to it, and he was looking at him and says, he doesn't know much about it. He's recently married, so he thinks it's a sustainable disruption. I am 10 years married, it's unsustainable disruption. But I realized that it's not getting anywhere, so I went ahead and I came across an article of Harvard Business School where two professors have co-authored it, Professor Bauer and Professor Christensen. And back in 1995, by the way, this article appeared in HBR. And it talked about how technology disruption is affecting or affects business model of companies, right? And they introduced two concepts there, which is, we say, and the basic premise of that article was that innovation leads to disruption, and then disruption leads to affecting business models. And they talked about sustainable innovations and disruptive innovations. Sustainable innovation they talked about is where, your performance trajectory do not change, you just keep on incrementally growing, and that's a very happy situation to be in. But in a disruptive innovation, is where they say it sacrifices the performance attributes of your current processes and which are actually valued by your customers, and it creates a new set of attributes which are not valued by your current set of customers, but these new set of attributes create a new market, which over time builds scale, and then your current customers migrate to that market and you fall off the cliff if you're not able to manage that. And hence, the disruptive innovation is where the management of models really set in. And we thought we'll marry these two of sustainable innovation and disruptive innovation and call it sustainable disruption. Because it's very important for us, and we have seen in the history of mankind and history of corporate world, so many companies falling off the cliff because we were not able to manage sustainably the disruption we were facing. In our own very ITES industry, we all know about how IBM dominated the mainframes, but they missed the game on the mini computer thing. Many of you have heard of Digital Equipment Company. They really mastered the mini computing market, but they missed out on the personal computing market. Apple came in with a lot of dominance on the personal computing market, but they missed out on the portable computer market. And so on and so forth. There are many examples across industry. This is not my time to talk about it. But it's very important for us to kind of, disruption is a way of life, and that's something is a cliche now. I mean, we are no longer talking about disruption happening tomorrow or day after. It's real time now. Every minute we face disruption in some form or the other. And it's very, very important as we go along is to identify the nature of that disruption, whether it's sustainable or it's actually disruptive innovation. And then we also need to identify, I think, the strategic significance of that disruptive innovation we are facing and build a business model around that so that we can capitalize on that. And for that, we need a future estimation of what the market will be given that innovation, which is kind of looking at us. And I think somewhere in the INFOCOM over the next 3 days, today, tomorrow, day after, we have got a fantastic line of speakers across length and breadth of the verticals and of the industry who will be talking about their experiences, about their insights on how we navigate this disruptive world in a very sustainable way. where our business models are sustainable. Tina talked about environment, of course, environment is sustainable, and so on and so forth, and various other important areas. But the importance of sustaining through disruption is given, and that's why that is the theme of INFOCOM this year. I hope you will enjoy the discourses. I hope you'll have a great time networking with people, sharing your insights, exchanging your views, and hopefully at the end of 3 days, we'll all go back a little bit more enriched than what we came in today. Thank you for being here. Look forward to interacting with you. All the best for INFOCOM.
Deep gratitude to you, Mr. Dhruva Mukherjee, CEO of ABP Group, for setting the tone for these next 3 days. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you the futurist keynote. And before I invite this gentleman onto the stage, a few words of introduction for him. Matthew Griffin, multi-award-winning futurist, has been described as a walking encyclopedia of the future by NASA and a futurist polymath. One of the world's most renowned futurists and strategic foresight experts, Matthew is the 15 times author of the blockbuster Codex of the Future series and is the founder and futurist-in-chief of the 311 Institute, a global futurist and de-futurist advisory firm working across the next 50 years. Matthew helped build and run several multi-billion-dollar businesses units and has a powerful reputation and a roster of clients that include royal households, world leaders, G7, G20, and G77 plus governments, and many of the world's most respected brands. Ladies and gentlemen, I will request all of you to put your hands together as I invite our futurist keynote speaker, Mr. Matthew Griffin, onto the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Right, how are you all? So that was loud, wasn't it? See, I might disrupt you all by bursting your eardrums. That's it. Then you won't be able to hear me, which, I mean, you might be fine. Some of you might be fine with that. So, my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute, a global futures and deep futures think tank. Now, I actually work across the next 50 years. I look at over 600 emerging technologies, hundreds of megatrends, and I'm the guy that organizations turn to when they want to figure out how they are going to be disrupted. Okay? And some of you are my clients. So, for example, we've got, where are we? We have Adobe. Adobe, we are reinventing the PDF. In addition to that, Adobe is being disrupted, or could be disrupted, by synthetic content, which underpins its creative suite. Now, when we have a look at Fortinet and Palo Alto, if you guys are in the room, on the one hand, you're being disrupted by an exponential growth in cybercrime, but using a kind of disruptive mindset, we have a new way to identify hackers and create impenetrable security systems. So we also have DXC, so welcome to DXC. They're trying to help organizations actually figure out how you manage this future and transform. And then we have everyone else. AWS, hello to AWS in the room. So we've been trying to figure out how we hack AWS. So, in this particular presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through sustainable disruption. But when I talk about sustainable disruption, this is very much angled at how do you constantly disrupt your own organization so that you can disrupt your competitors, enter new markets, and fundamentally become the leader in new markets. So, when we have a look at the future, when we have a look at today, have you noticed that there's only one thing changing? Yeah, from a human mental perspective, it's easy to get our heads around one thing, right? But actually, when we think about what's changing, it just happens to be absolutely everything. So, when we have a look at society, society is changing. We talk very much in terms of technology-led disruption, but actually a lot of the disruption that we see today isn't necessarily technology-led. Yeah, when we talk about technologies like generative artificial intelligence, we can see disruption coming. I started talking about generative artificial intelligence 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I was in London with Bloomberg talking about how these AIs that would create content would eventually be used to collapse financial markets and misinformation and disinformation. And then what, 2 years ago, people went, hey, where did this generative AI stuff come from? We can see disruption. We have economic disruption, so we see a decoupling of the world. And then we've got political disruption, which we won't even go there. Now, from a futures perspective, NASA has this orbital perspective. So when astronauts go into space, when they're 400 to 600 miles up, they see the world as this kind of rather simple, pale blue dot. There's no wars, there's no boundaries, everything is straightforward, right? But as we come down to Earth, the fact of the matter is, by 2040, we'll have 65% of people living in megacities. We have over 8 billion people now on the planet. It starts getting confusing when we get to ground. Cybercrime is a $1.2 trillion industry. We have activism and wars. We have all these challenges. And when we have a look at the problems that the world faces, we have 2.2 billion tons of trash every year. We have 57 gigatons of CO2 going into the Earth's atmosphere. 40% of the world's crops get destroyed. We have fires in the Arctic and in Siberia. Globally, we now have Category 6 hurricanes in Japan and in America. We have a new classification coming. But despite all of these challenges, all of these problems, we have pioneers that are developing new energy solutions. We're electrifying industries like Adit Birla. We are growing food in new ways in vertical farms. We are educating our children in new things using new technologies and techniques. We have technology pioneers who are developing new emerging technologies. We have healthcare pioneers who will extend our lives in the year 28. And we, of course, are not only changing this world, but we're creating brand new virtual worlds. So today, from an opportunity perspective and a disruption perspective, we actually have 3 economies. We have the physical economy. I sold you a pair of physical Adidas trainers. We have the digital economy. I sold you a subscription. And then we have the virtual economy, which is where basically I can sell you virtual products. So there's lots of opportunity. Now, when we have a look at the future, when we have a look at the present day, how you think, feel, and act matters. If you looked at the video that I showed you, and you think that the future is a bleak place because we have climate change, we have 1 billion people who struggle to be fed at the end of every day, then you might be anxious and worried about the future. So how you think about the future affects how you feel about the future. And if you're anxious and worried about the future, then it's much more likely that in terms of the way that you act, you're going to go and lock yourself away in a room. However, if you look at the future and you think the future is full of opportunity, then you feel optimistic. And if you feel optimistic, then you're much more likely to try to go out and explore this future, figure out how it can benefit you, and what new things you can create to move into and or develop new markets. So how you think about something affects how you feel about it, and that fundamentally affects what you do. So reframe yourself. Now, I also recommend, these are kind of the core attributes, you need to expand your thinking. The vast majority of disruptions don't come from within your own industry. If you think about the oil and gas industry, do you really think that the oil and gas industry was ever invested in moving away from fossil fuels? When you have a look at the automotive industry, do you ever think that Mercedes said, you know what, we've been building cars with internal combustion engines for 100 years. It's time for us to do things differently. Disruption generally comes from the places that you least expect. And when we actually have a look at the automotive manufacturers, Mercedes invented the car. They have a market capitalization of $65 billion. You could argue that Tesla reinvented the car. They have a market capitalization approaching $1 trillion. When you look at disruption as an opportunity rather than a threat, the upsides, the revenues, the share prices, the shareholder returns are staggering. Once you've looked across different industries to see what they're doing, once you've looked across different countries, India disrupts differently to China. China disrupts differently to the United States or Europe. So when we talk about expanding your horizons, don't just think about looking at what other industries are doing, look at what other countries are doing, and then bring those pieces back. Then start experimenting. If you found something interesting, experiment. Because you can't really ever understand these new things if you aren't using them yourselves. And then you have to unlearn. The way that we are creating businesses now is fundamentally different to anything that we've seen in the past. And I'm going to show you a video in a little while of just exactly why you need to unlearn everything that you've learned about the world. Now, from a disruption perspective, we can kind of define disruption like this. Disruption is a radical change to the status quo. Plain and simple. But the fact of the matter is, you get disrupted for two reasons, as a business and as a country as well. You get disrupted because you disrupted yourself. You saw disruption, you did the due diligence on it, you experimented, and then you acted. And so you disrupt yourself and you move into a new market. Or you were disrupted because you saw it coming and you just didn't bother to do anything about it. We can forgive not seeing disruption, but if you're an organization that saw disruption coming and you simply sat on your butt and did nothing about it, then that's on you. But disruption also comes from anywhere. Now, when we're having a look at the future, ultimately, these are the three things that you need in order to be more successful, or even massively successful. Firstly, you need a vision. So what is the vision of your company? Now, for example, if we have a look at Apple, Apple's vision for itself as a company is in 10 to 20 years' time, Apple do not want to be known as a smartphone manufacturer. They want to be known as a health company. So this week, Tim Cook came out and said, we no longer want to be known as a smartphone company. When people look back in time at what Apple is in the year 2025, 2030, we want to be known as a healthcare company. Now, on the one hand, that's a massive shift. It's a massive market. It's a new vision. Apple will only achieve that new vision if they have the right culture. Because if Tim Cook says, we want to be a healthcare company, and no one else in the company says, I agree with you, let's be on this journey with you, they'll fail. There is a reason why company culture is called the corporate immune system. Because if you want to kill change, having a toxic culture is the fastest way to kill your company. That's 80% of the battle. And then the rest of the battle, the other 20%, is doing. You've got your vision, you've got your culture sorted out and aligned. Now you need to get on with stuff. So here's a tale of two companies. I ran IBM's public safety and national security business back in the day. IBM saw this new technology coming along, technology called cloud computing. Cloud computing was fundamentally disruptive to about $50 billion worth of IBM's managed outsourcing business, the big data centers, the strategic outsourcing stuff. And so, as we saw the rise of AWS and Microsoft, IBM did nothing. IBM had a market capitalization of $110 billion. As IBM sat there and sat there and sat there, eventually AWS, Google, Cloud, and Microsoft became the market leaders. IBM lost half of its market value and then started splitting itself up. IBM saw disruption coming, had a problem doing the due diligence and quantifying it, and then I'd argue had the wrong culture. Now let's look at Accenture. Accenture saw a different kind of technology revolution coming through. They saw digital transformation. So they invested early. They built out capabilities, they hired people, they bought companies. They invested really quite heavily in trying to be the market leader in a market that at that point didn't really exist. They built their capability up over time, and over time, over the space of about 7 years, Accenture, who saw disruption coming, did their due diligence, took it seriously, and tried to get ahead of it, ended up tripling their company revenues from $20 billion to $60 billion. It's not that you aren't seeing disruption coming. It's your culture that makes all of the difference, and then the actions that you take. Now let's have another story of two giants. So both of these are my clients, Samsung and Huawei. 10 years ago, I sat down with the vice president of Huawei CRI in London. And he said, in 10 years' time, what do you think the worst thing that Huawei could be? And I said, well, a hardware company. About 4 years later, we started putting together plans for Harmony OS, which is essentially the Huawei and Chinese equivalent of the Google Play Store. Huawei as an organization has seen terrific disruption. Not only have they been banned from buying American chips and products, they've been banned from markets, and they've had their 5G telecommunications gear literally ripped out of the American market and the European market. However, both Samsung and Huawei have two things in common. Huawei spend $15 billion a year on research and development, and they have 45,000 people looking at not just the next technology, but N+2, N+3, N+4 technologies up to 50 years out. The other client is Samsung. So Samsung in South Korea have a campus called the Chaos Campus. They have 3,000 people who are expressly dedicated to trying to destroy the company. Because if you know how to destroy your own company, then you know how to disrupt your company. You know where your competitors and new competitors will come from, and you can develop the plans and the visions that you need to either avoid disruption or to lead disruptive change. So between Huawei and Samsung, they are relatively unique globally because they are always trying to tear their own companies down so that they can build the new thing. Now, from a disruption perspective, I mentioned that disruption isn't just purely technological. How ambitious are you? It's all very well having a vision, but especially in India, consumer market of 1.5 billion people, record levels of foreign direct investment in the country, excellent talent. How ambitious are you? And do you just realize the kinds of ambition that you're actually up against? Because if you've ever heard of Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, which is now a what, $150 billion startup AI company, I would argue that Sam Altman's ambition is greater than all of your ambitions. So I'm going to put this into perspective. In 2028, Sam Altman believes that OpenAI will be able to create artificial general intelligence. Now, AGI, we estimate, will have an IQ of about 1,600, 1 billion times more general knowledge than any human, and a learning speed of approximately 3 trillion times faster than any human. Now, Sam Altman categorizes AGI as the point in time where artificial intelligence is capable of outperforming all humans at all economically valuable work. So think about ChatGPT and GPT-5 that are expert enterprise coders. So on the one hand, Sam Altman could literally own the entire global services industry, where AI configures networks, autonomous artificial intelligence systems manage your cybersecurity, where AI does your software development, it does your product development and everything else. But when I talk about ambition, what if you owned an artificial intelligence that could make multi-billion-dollar businesses? This is Sam at a JP Morgan event.
Highly performant, smaller teams, thanks to these tools and these technologies, you can be able to do so much more. Is that a trend you're seeing from the startups growing around y'all in Cerebral Valley?
We're going to see 10-person billion-dollar companies pretty soon, like billion-dollar valuations. And the thing that in my little group chat with my tech CEO friends, there's this betting pool for the first year that there's a one-person billion-dollar company, which would have been unimaginable without AI, and now will happen.
I'm so happy you said that because I literally just wrote that out in a letter to my LPs for an AGM. This is a radical idea, and it gets even more exciting when you remember none of us ever, or all of us who have built companies to even more than 100 people, don't miss back when it was smaller. And I think there's going to be a new drug, the exact opposite of that ZERP phenomenon, where CEOs and founders are going to just be so excited to get up and go to work with much smaller, much more performant, much more stronger culturally teams. And I'm also kind of bummed I'm not on that CEO group chat, but we can table that for later. But I think this feels like a seminal moment, and I get you all are not sitting around patting yourselves on the back, but it's a big deal.
So I've shown you a video of an individual saying, I am basically creating an artificial intelligence that will be able to create a multi-billion-dollar business that is run by one person. It's going to start in the tech sector. It's going to kind of be a digital company. So I think software development, think agentic artificial intelligence. As you're building out your own businesses, I've shown you a disruption. Now at Harvard, we used AI to build 70 autonomous businesses. Within 7 minutes, we built an enterprise CRM system for $1. I've shown you how you can be disrupted. What's your play? Now, when we talk about technology-led disruption, the rate of innovation is accelerating. In Germany, we used an artificial intelligence to develop a brand new rocket engine that's 3D printable, and we developed it in 6 hours. So I start disrupting the global rocket industry. What's your play? Google DeepMind has an artificial intelligence that can create new vaccines in 7 minutes. In Silico, in Australia, uses an artificial intelligence to create 30,000 new medical drugs in 21 days. Speed is also a disruptor, because it used to be the case that you had time to see this stuff coming, and you had time to understand it, get a point of view, think about what it meant for your businesses, how it would impact you, and then develop a strategy. In the past, you might have had 10 years to see this coming, develop a strategy, and build out new capabilities in your response. Now, you might have a month. We've got artificial intelligence with Google and NVIDIA building the next generation of GPUs and AI accelerator chips. If you are investing in the Indian semiconductor marketplace, what happens when your competitors are using a technology multiplier that means they can create new AI accelerator chips every week? Then we have AIs generating code. Then we have this. Synthetic content. How many of you watch Bollywood films? Yeah, we like Bollywood films. Now, 10 years ago, I showed how artificial intelligence was going to be creating content. So artificial intelligence is now starting to get to the point where it can make a relatively decent movie. And over the next 3 to 5 years, you'll just be able to say, create a brand new Bollywood movie for me in the style of X with a plot of Y, and it will create the video, it will create the content. Bollywood, if it is not very careful, on the one hand is going to be disrupted. Content creation is being disrupted. But secondly, Bollywood will see price collapse. Because how many of you in the audience today have the budget to create a blockbuster Bollywood movie? No? No hands up? Oh. Evidently we need some CEOs in the room. Now, artificial intelligence via synthetic content generation drops the cost of making a movie from, say, $100 million to 0. In 5 years' time, your kids will be able to make a good Bollywood movie, put it onto YouTube and say, hey, here we go. Bollywood will face price collapse and disruption. Now, in addition to this, this also gives us a new lesson in disruption. When it comes to disruption, distribution matters. The reason why OpenAI penned a deal with Apple for free wasn't because they wanted to give Apple access to ChatGPT for free. No, no, no. It was because Apple gave them distribution to 1 billion devices. Distribution is your moat. Think about Reliance Jio and so on and so forth. Distribution is your moat. Now, when it comes to disruption, we talk about technology-led disruption. But if you go to any investor and you say, I've created a brand new drink, and I want to put that drink into every supermarket, the first thing that every investor will say will be, it's a packed market, you stand absolutely no chance of disrupting Pepsi, Coca-Cola, etc., right? The drinks market is absolutely packed. And yet Prime disrupted the global drinks market. They now have revenues of $1.2 billion. They did it because they leveraged their YouTube fame. We call it playground marketing. They created a drink and then they used playground marketing across social media to disrupt the global drinks industry. Geo. I see disruption as a game of chess. So Reliance Jio in 2015-2016 thought, how do we dominate the Indian telecommunications market? And I mean, you should probably already know this. What they did is they gave away a lot of 4G SIMs. So can you now imagine the CEO conversation saying, I want us to be the biggest Indian telecoms operator in the future. How are you going to do that? I was going to give away hundreds of millions of 4G SIMs, or millions of 4G SIMs. At what point does the board and the CFO say, you're an idiot? Giving stuff away? Absolutely no. And yet here's the play. Jio gave away millions of 4G SIMs. It has a market now of 15 billion. It's got 470, 480 million Indian customers. But that's the start. The next move for Reliance Jio was then to create Jio Financial Services, payments on all these mobiles that you have. So now Jio starts disrupting the Indian financial services market. Then they move out of India. Then they start moving basically into Southeast Asia and other places. Disruption is sometimes a game of chess. Temu. If you step back about 5 to 10 years ago, everyone in the boardroom would say, when we're having a look at the future and when we're having a look at disruption, what would Amazon do? What would the big tech giants do? Now, when we have a look at the grocery space and the retail space, if I told you that we have a way to disrupt Amazon, what, $200 billion company, people would be saying, as a startup, we cannot possibly disrupt Amazon. So what we have is we have social media applications which we start turning into super apps. Within those social media platforms, we embed payments, we embed commerce, and all sorts of other things. In TikTok, Temu have inserted themselves into TikTok natively. TikTok has about 1 billion users now. Did you know that Temu was started in 2022, 2 years ago? This year, it's going to have revenues of $54 billion because they disrupted Amazon by embedding themselves into super apps. This is a disintermediation play. When we have a look at financial fintechs like Revolut, Revolut now has a market capitalization of $54 billion, and everyone looks at Revolut and says, which is a little bit like RuPay, but everyone looks at fintech, Revolut and says, they're a fintech. They are not a fintech. Revolut is a super app. And then when you have a look at On, I've seen some of you wearing these. On tried to sell their trainers, tried to sell the company to Nike. This year, On will have revenues of $2.6 billion. If I said, I'm going to disrupt Nike and Adidas with a new trainer, people will say, well, no, you're not going to make a dent. They built a community. In terms of identifying new markets, moving into new markets, and dominating new markets, it's not always about technology. It's about vision and strategy and then execution. Now, from a leadership perspective, leaders need to have two brains. So there's functional leadership, which is how do you get the most from the organization that you have today? How do you execute lean? How do you sharpen the saw in corporate geek speak. And then you need entrepreneurship, or enterprise leadership. So enterprise leadership is very much about thinking about what's coming next, what do we want to be when we grow up. Increasingly, when you have a look at the world's most valuable companies, they are what we call ambidextrous organizations. Now watch this next video and tell me how many industries this 1-minute experiment disrupts.
Velocity. Oh, we can see it coming down through the plume.
You probably know the company.
Booster coming in hot for booster touch. We're going to ignite 13 of those Raptor engines, and this view is incredible right now. You can see how fast this vehicle is moving on the left-hand screen. Landing burn has been ignited. We're now down to 3 Raptor engines. We can see those chopsticks now in the air.
That was a great experiment. Now, SpaceX is an example of an ambidextrous organization. They have the successful Falcon 9 rockets, but they are increasingly creating this. This is the Space Heavy. It's a heavy lift launch vehicle. How many industries does that help Elon Musk disrupt? Is it 1? So hands up for 1. No. Is it 2? Okay. Is it 3? You're either not putting your hands up or you're very confident about this. Is it 4? Okay. This disrupts at least 4 industries. Now, it disrupts the space launch industry because it drops the cost of launching stuff into space 100-fold. It disrupts the military logistics industry because you start moving military equipment from one side of the planet to the other in 45 minutes. As the costs come down, it disrupts civil aviation. So we have Tata in the room. Tata actually own Air India, bought in 2021. What happens when SpaceX start moving people from one side of the planet to the other for the cost of a commercial airline ticket? Because that is Musk's vision. However, in addition to that, we just talked about Reliance Jio. Why do you need a 4G or 5G phone if this helps Elon Musk launch 22,000 satellites into low Earth orbit, cheaper than ever before, to then provide every individual in India with space-based satellite-to-phone 5G capabilities? This, most people will see this as a reusable rocket, but this disrupts at least 4 industries. In time, it also disrupts the space-based manufacturing industries, healthcare, semiconductors, and all sorts of things, because increasingly we're manufacturing things in zero gravity in space. So, in terms of proactive leadership, you need to think about what do you want to achieve versus avoid. If you're thinking, how do we avoid going bust or bankrupt, then you're thinking tactically. If you're thinking, how do we achieve more, you're thinking strategically. You need to think, see, and plan long term. All of the largest organizations are increasingly looking at the long term because the markets are huge, like Elon Musk. Elon Musk isn't thinking, how do I disrupt Reliance Jio's mobile services in India? He will just run over Jio. And so Jio need a play, which they will probably have a play. But also, when you're looking at new product development, you need to think, what new products and services can we be building for Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3? So short, medium, and long term. Because this is your roadmap. And then as you end up figuring out what your Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 products and services are, you can start building out your future capability. And increasingly, if I say to you, opportunity is not your problem. How many of you think that you have no opportunities in India, let alone anywhere else? You are not opportunity constrained. You have too much opportunity in front of you. Your actual problem is how do you align the capital, the culture, the organizational structures and resources to move into new markets, do new things in new ways, and disrupt your competitors. And then when we finally have a look at core behaviors, embrace change and ambiguity, because everything's getting faster. Everything is changing. Take risks. If you are not willing as an organization or as an executive group to take risks, you will get run over by someone else. And you need to get uncomfortable. Because if you are comfortable, then you're happy with the status quo. And while you're happy with your status quo, you have Sam Altman looking at your businesses going, I'm going to take you all out. And then at some point, you're going to be uncomfortable. You've got to be curious. You've got to ask better questions. Go everywhere, talk to everyone. You've got to be open-minded. Because I said we have Palo Alto and Fortinet in the room. With one of them, we are now starting to identify malware using sound. Because using artificial intelligence, we can identify the sound that malware makes when it's running on your hard drives and your CPUs. Be open-minded. I can disrupt every Indian bank with a fridge, which is maybe a story for later. And then, of course, basically from an acting perspective, you need to grow outside the core. So companies that have done this, this is where you leverage your existing capabilities as an organization. So AWS is an example of this. So Amazon Retail was using huge amounts of compute. And at some point, Jeff Bezos thought, why don't we repurpose that compute to the cloud? AWS was born. Disney. Have you noticed that Disney is doing lots of franchises now? You've got all kinds of different franchises that are coming out, but each character within the franchise now has its own series. That has increased Disney's revenues like crazy. And then new growth engines. Ørsted was a fossil fuel company in Norway. They are now the world's largest renewable energy company, especially in wind. Google's a search engine. Except Google is increasingly becoming a healthcare company. They're building new capabilities. In the UAE wants to 3D print all new buildings by 2030. So when we talk about building new growth engines, next year, try to get 2% of your revenues from a new business that you don't have today. And then the year after that, it's 4%, then it's 10%, then it's 20%. So next year, try to get 2% of your revenues from something you're not doing today. And then move at speed. Disruption is increasingly rapid. And while most of you think you can probably move at speed, if I said to you, I've identified a brand new market opportunity. It's a $1 trillion market opportunity. It's just sitting there waiting for you to take it. You will tell me you can move into that market really quickly. Prove it. Because most of you won't be able to move into that market very quickly at all. And then, finally, it's never too late to move. One of my clients is Nokia. They are the literal case study for an organization that was horribly, horribly, publicly disrupted. And I was with them about 2 months ago, and the culture of the company is now very much, we can sit where we are, and we can, as Nokia, continue to bring in revenues of about $2 billion from our patent portfolio. However, over time, that patent portfolio revenue is going to decline. We have to move. we have to be disrupting ourselves. We have to be looking at new opportunities. So the entire culture of Nokia is all about doing new things, finding new opportunities, and then getting as much from those opportunities as they can. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed that. And then I think basically we have a couple of minutes of questions if you want to. And then I'm off. Yeah. So, does anyone have any questions? If you are struggling for questions, you can always ask ChatGPT. Disney actually have been doing that to me. I get people phoning me up and they go, actually, we've got a list of questions for you. And I was like, oh, so that's great. And then at the end of some of the calls I do, especially with Disney, they'll go, actually, we've been asking ChatGPT what questions to ask you. So.
Hi, Matthew. Abhijit here.
Hello.
Hello. A very interesting presentation. My query is between speed, innovation, and sustainability. You know, these 3 points kind of create that strategic thinking that you said and the tactical thinking that you said. You know, how do you kind of create an action plan around it?
So sustainability in terms of green. Yeah. Okay. So let's take artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, by the year 2030, it'll be using 3 times more energy than it is today. When we have a look at a standard new artificial intelligence data center, it's typically 300 to 500 megawatts, and Facebook and Meta are planning 1 gigawatt data centers. So when we have a look at sustainability, especially from an artificial intelligence perspective, we're now at the University of Oxford trying to develop AIs that use 1,000 times less energy and 1,000 times less compute. So this is where we move away from these sort of large language models to sort of shallow neural networks and small language models. In China, they've been using GPU clusters. So in America, you'll just build 1 giant data center full of GPUs, run your AI models on that, and then off you go. In China, because China was sanctioned by the US on GPUs, they've actually been running artificial intelligence training across multiple clusters, so remote data centers. And though their models are 95% cheaper than America's, but also use a lot less energy on the inference side. From a sustainability perspective as well, this is typically where I say that we shouldn't be sustainable. So I gave the keynotes at COP28 last year. I say that we should be regenerative. So when we have a look at sustainable solutions, we do have artificial intelligence that is developing new materials. We're creating digital twins. If you have a look at the circular economy, for example, that rocket engine I showed, most rocket engines have about 10,000 parts. That's a single rocket engine that's 3D printed. And if you 3D print it in a particular way, it can use about 60% less materials than a traditional rocket engine. So when we look at sustainability, sustainability doesn't really have to cost you anything. I generally argue that if you do innovation right, you can innovate, and you can innovate in a way that is even cheaper for you. So Adit Birla, I'll give you an example with Adit Birla. So Adit Birla are trying to create carbon negative and carbon neutral cement for India. They've done that in a variety of different ways. Now, traditionally, with cement, it's a highly energy-intensive process. Now, they could use fossil fuels. However, when you think about renewable energy, the cost of renewable energy is now $20 per megawatt hour. So fossil fuel costs do this, yeah? Russia, Saudi Arabia, etc. say, this is, we're going to increase oil supply, decrease oil supply, and your oil costs do this. Renewable energy costs do this. So from Adit Birla's perspective, they're now looking at solar panels and a mini nuclear reactor, because energy generated from solar panels will be hundreds of times cheaper than from fossil fuels, which from Adit Birla's perspective now means that they can either create a sustainable product cheaper than their competition, or they can create a sustainable product and make a lot more profit. So when you integrate sustainability and regenerative business practices into your product development, into your company culture, your cost base actually decreases, which is good for the environment and good for the CFO. Always got to keep the CFO happy.
Yes, we have another question here. The microphone.
Okay, thank you for the question. So how do we capitalize sustainable disruption? Sort of, yeah. So that's a great question, because actually, so when we have a look at energy, yeah, switching from fossil fuel-based energy to renewable energy is a $92 trillion investment in market shift. So this is where there's a couple of, so when we talk about, say, for example, energy generation, there's a couple of different things we can do. On the one hand, the government could provide subsidies, tax breaks and relief, as well as low-interest loans to organizations that are building, should we say, green things. So it's not just energy, but we'll say green things. So I sometimes argue that the general role of government is to de-risk the transition between the old thing and the new thing. Once the new thing starts taking off, like electric vehicles, supercharger networks, all that kind of stuff, once the new thing starts taking off, the government then hands over the responsibility for the investment in that new capability to private industry, so global asset managers, etc. So I do a lot of work with global asset managers. We have about 60 trillion under asset. And then eventually companies come in. But one of the biggest problems to moving from our existing economy, not just fossil fuel, but our existing economy to our future economy is capital, which is where you need strong investment vehicles, tax breaks, subsidies. You need to be attractive, so foreign direct investment is a great example of that. So India is increasingly seen as a connector economy, and as a connector economy that plays with lots of different countries, connector economies get 20% more investment than countries that don't play nicely with other countries. So that's again about ambition, culture, political stability, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I always say, you know, we have, whatever the problem is, we've got the solution, we've got the startup, but if we want to get from there to here, you have to have investors in the middle and the government in the middle, regulations and so on and so forth. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that very insightful presentation. I'll request you to kindly remain on stage, and I'll request Mr. Dhruva Mukherjee to kindly come on stage and present a memento of our gratitude, and we would like you to be felicitated. So thank you very much, and a huge round of applause for Mr. Matthew Griffin. Thank you, Mr. Matthew Griffin. Your visionary perspective on emerging technologies and their impact on our future has truly inspired us to think differently about the challenges and opportunities ahead. Thank you once again, sir. I'm sure a lot of you have your questions. You can ask him offline. And we would now like to go over to our leadership keynote. And our speaker today is Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik, former board member, State Bank of India, and ex-chairman of Microsoft. May I request you, sir, to kindly come onto the stage and take over. And a huge round of applause as I request Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik to kindly come on stage. Sir.
Thank you. Okay. Wow, this is going to be a hard act to follow. So if the previous speaker was talking about the future, I think the reason I'm standing here is because I'm going to relate the future to the past. And that's what I'd like to share with you. A little bit about my past history, because a lot of what he's talked about, I've actually seen it play out over the last 50 years as far as the technology industry is concerned. I also have to admit that after listening to Mr. Dhruva Mukherjee, I suddenly realized that what I wanted to spend time on was about disruption and sustainability, not sustainable disruption. So perhaps that's another view of looking at how do you continue to make a company successful, is if it has a focus on sustainability, and using digital disruption is very, very critical. One of the lessons I've learned in life, especially working for a company called Sun Microsystems, is that technology has the shelf life of a banana. So whatever we talked about as far as the future is concerned, today it's about AI, it's about quantum computing, it's about virtual reality. Think about these as pieces of technology which have come to the fore today, but 20 years from now, there'll be another term. We heard another term called AGI, general intelligence, artificial general intelligence, as distinct from AI. So you will find that technology will continually come. The new technologies gives you an opportunity to disrupt your existing business, but it's more than just technology. It has to be a whole bunch of other things. So anyway, now they've set it up. So let's talk a little bit about, is this showing? How do I get it on the screen, the presentation? You're still working on it. Okay, got it. Thank you. So just to give you a little bit of a background, I graduated from IIT Engineering College about nearly 50 years back. That was the time of unit record machines. It was punched cards. The microprocessor hadn't been invented. And in the 50 years since then, I've worked at IBM as an intern. I've worked in HP as the head of sales and marketing. I've worked in Digital Equipment Corporation as a vice president of sales and marketing. I've worked in Sun Microsystems as the managing director for India, and then as the global VP for their volume business. And then I worked in Microsoft under two leaders, Steve Ballmer and Satya Nadella. And I think a lot of my experiences are based upon that, and I'd like to share some of my observation, especially in the light of what the previous speaker talked about. So if you think about all these companies I've worked for, the three which currently still exist is IBM, but in a completely different form. In my time, when I was an intern, IBM was the largest IT company in the world. When I joined HP, it was primarily a test and measuring instrument company. Then it became a full-fledged test and measuring as well as a computing company, and now it shrunk to just a small portfolio of different products. Same thing has happened to IBM. When I joined Digital Equipment Corporation, it was at its peak as the inventor of the mini computer, and it was just taking over from the mainframe computers of IBM. It was considered in the late 80s and 90s as the only credible threat to IBM, but it was in the mini computer era. And then I joined Sun Microsystems, which at that point of time was the leader in workstations. They reinvented themselves, they invented the server, and then they came out with the concept of the network is the computer, which is the forerunner of cloud computing. But it also died. And then when I joined Microsoft, it was all about PCs. It was the leader along with Intel and Microsoft, which dominated the PC industry. They were the real winners, not the guys who made the PCs, but Intel and Microsoft. And that business nearly died because it got replaced by the mobile phone. And then Satya Nadella took over, and he transformed the company and created into a cloud AI company. He saw that opportunity and he dramatically changed the nature of the company. And I can share some stories. Perhaps in the, we have a fireside chat after this presentation, and I can perhaps share with you my observations about all of these three companies, because there are lessons to be learned of all. Two companies, leaders in their field, half their current size. Two companies, leaders in their field, don't exist today. The people and their technology live on. And one company which had a near-death experience and is now the most valued company in the world. And it was all, we can talk about how that happened. But coming back to the original presentation, which I had put together, I'm really going to be talking about digital disruption and sustainability. Because my belief is that if you want to be able to continuously disrupt, and if you want to be a successful company, then you have to focus on sustainability. And the previous speaker did talk about it, that if you continue to power your business with fossil fuel, and if you don't look at renewables, then you will have a challenge. So let's start with a quick overview. Digital disruption is like that unexpected plot twist in your favorite TV show. It changes everything. It is transforming traditional industries, creating new business models, and changing the way we live and work. On the other hand, sustainability is all about meeting our needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. So if you take disruption and you take sustainability, when these two forces intersect, magic happens. Digital technologies have the potential to enable more sustainable ways of doing business and living our lives. Imagine a world where we use resources efficiently, reduce waste, and promote renewable energy. Sounds like a dream, but like every good story, there is a twist, because digital disruption can also increase energy consumption and generate electronic waste. It's a classic case of with great power comes great responsibility. So the earlier speaker talked a lot about how digital is going to disrupt the world. But what is important is to get that balance between use of digital technology and sustainability. And the interesting thing is that there are many companies today who are doing both digital disruption and sustainability. Traditional companies like Unilever, it's a consumer goods company, has committed to becoming carbon positive by 2030, while also investing in digital technologies to improve supply chain efficiency. DHL, a logistic company, has implemented a carbon neutral delivery program while also using digital technologies like IoT sensors to optimize supply chain operations. The impact of these digital disruption is both on the bottom line as well as in terms of sustainability. And that's why the choices they made in terms of what they're going to disrupt became very, very critical. Tesla as an electric vehicle company is disrupting the automotive industry with its sustainable technology, while also leveraging digital technologies to innovate solutions like over-the-air software updates. You know, I love Tesla. I actually used to like Elon Musk a lot till he took a political stance. After that, I sort of don't have the same level of interest. But I remember 20 years ago, I was visiting the Bay Area. My brother lives there. And he showed me a little shop on the corner where there was fancy-looking cars. And he says, Dada, that belongs to a guy called Elon Musk. He's a playboy. He's built these cars for playboys. It'll go at 120, reach a top speed of 120 kilometers per hour in 3 seconds. But he's a mad guy. 20 years later, my brother has 2 of his cars. Which just goes to prove how a madman with a completely different perspective of the world started off focusing only on a $150,000 sports car, but then gradually has made this available across the world and built an infrastructure which goes to prove that electric cars is worthwhile. And then IBM, a technology company which has made sustainability a core part of their business strategy while also driving digital disruption with new technologies like blockchain and AI. But closer home, we have a number of companies which have focused on using digital to help companies become more sustainable, including themselves. TCS has implemented various AI-driven solutions to optimize energy consumption and reduce carbon emissions across its global operations. They use data analytics to monitor and manage energy use in their data centers. You got Reliance Industries. We talked about Geo, but even the petrochemical part of the business has adopted digital technologies to enhance its sustainability efforts, particularly in the petrochemical and refining divisions. And then look at Mahindra & Mahindra has an integrated digital tools to drive its sustainability initiatives, and the company is using AI and data analytics to improve the efficiency of its manufacturing processes, reducing waste and promote sustainable practices across. And it's not just the private companies, but it's also the public sector companies which are taking a lead. So whether it's NTPC, or it's ONGC, or it's Bharat Electronics, they're all focusing on using digital technologies to actually create a much more sustainable world. So businesses can gain competitive advantage by adopting sustainable technologies. Think about it: cost reductions, increased efficiency, and enhanced brand reputation. It's a win-win situation. Plus, customers love companies that care about the planet. It's like getting extra points for being a very good human. And if your employees are more the Gen Z or the millennials, this is one thing which they like to, the kind of companies they like to work for are the ones which are act like good human beings, but also think about the world. So the other areas where sustainable technology is having or disruptive innovation is happening using technology is we're talking about moving to sustainable energy like solar, wind, and hydropower. We're talking about smart cities, which use technologies like intelligent transportation systems, energy efficient buildings, and smart grids. This hotel, for example, is LEED certified. ITC the ITC Hotel Group actually took a decision nearly 20 years ago that all their hotels would be energy efficient, and therefore they've been able to maintain the cost of operations and efficiency much, much lower. And in the last 20 years, the cost of energy has increased, but because of the way they manage their energy consumption, they've actually been able to maintain their bottom line. And then we have this concept of the circular economy. It's a sustained economic model that aims to eliminate waste and reduce the consumption of the finite resources. So how can you use for sustainable technology for competitive advantage? We've talked about cost reduction, we've talked about increased efficiency, and more important, companies which are driving this kind of technology for sustainability are demonstrating a commitment and a social sustainability, and that's built into their brand. So we've talked about this. I thought I'll just close here. Digital disruption is changing the way business operates. It's been happening for the last 50 years. It will continue, and it will give opportunities to companies for growth and innovation. By embracing digital technology, organizations can drive positive change and create value in new and exciting ways. In my present role as being an independent director on many boards, I constantly get this question: how can we use AI? And answer and response I give to most managing directors and chairmen of company is first identify the problem. While digital disruption is excellent, the problem is it's like a hammer looking for a nail. If you cannot think of the business innovation or the impact which you want to have, just applying technology for technology's sake is a challenge. And that goes back to my story that technology has a shelf life of a banana. So be clear that yes, it's good to have digital disruption in changing the ways business operate, but be very clear about the business goals which has to be obtained. Sustainability is actually becoming a key driver of business success. By embracing sustainable technology and practices, organizations can reduce their environmental impact and create long-term value for their stakeholders. And that is becoming increasingly important for most companies. So a lot of the time we spend on board meetings is to look at that. What is the footprint which we will leave behind from a sustainability? And that goes across people, it goes across supply chain, it goes across the use of various different kinds of energy. And it's at the intersection of digital disruption and sustainability that presents exciting possibilities for businesses to create value and drive positive change. By integrating sustainable technology and driving disruptive innovation, organizations can create a sustainable future for themselves and for society. So that's the message I'd like to leave you with, is that digital disruption is here to stay. It's been ongoing for the last 50 years, from punch card machines programming to artificial intelligence, which actually creates its own programs. That's where we are in the span of 50 years, and the future looks even more brighter, or as some people will say, more grimmer. But the application of technology for what purpose becomes very, very critical, and that's the choice which we as humans, as managers, and as CEOs of companies have to make. And we need to make those choices wisely, not just for the bottom line, but also from a sustainability perspective as to what we will leave the planet behind for our children. So it's beyond the balance sheet. And if we can do both, then it will lead to a win-win, both for the planet, as well as for us humans, as well as for the companies we work for. So that's the message I really want to leave you. Those changes, those innovations are actually more permanent because they actually have an impact on everything which we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll request you to ask if they have any questions.
Sure. If there's any questions, not just on what I talked about sustainability, but if you want some, I think we're going to be doing a fireside chat, so perhaps we can hold on to the questions when we're doing the fireside chat. But if there's anything around sustainability and digital disruption, this could be a good time.
If there's any question, otherwise I'm going to ask sir a question. Since I'm a leadership trainer and happiness coach, I'd like to request you to answer this question, please, sir. What are the key leadership lessons that you have learned from your experiences at Microsoft and SBI that can be applied to today's rapidly changing technology landscapes?
So I think the one thing which I've learned in life is that you have to have learning agility. The ability to continuously learn and relearn is actually the hallmark of today's generation or civilization. I'm pretty old, I'm a baby boomer. But I still remember that I used to go to sleep reading manuals when things weren't digital, and I used to remember now I'm continuously reading. When I retired in 2017, the one thing which I was extremely concerned and worried about was that how will I continue to learn? Because when you work for a large corporation like Microsoft, you get a chance to meet world leaders, you get a chance to meet the best of CEOs, and you interact with the brightest and sharpest of minds. What happens when you retire? So I've solved that equation. So I am continuously learning. So that is number one. The second is what I've learned from some of the boards of the companies I've with, like for example, State Bank of India. You have to continuously redefine your purpose, who you are. So SBI can be just another bank offering a plethora of financial products and services to its customers, or it can be the Bank of India, and the bank for every Indian, which means that it has to have a variety of different products and services delivered across a multiplicity of channels. Once you've got your purpose right, and the purpose is how you want to be known, not how you want to be known, but how others will see you. If you can get that purpose done and identify the vision of the company, then you can unify the organization. And one of the lessons I've learned from Microsoft is that if you want to make a radical change in terms of your business strategy and revive the fortunes of the company, culture is very, very critical. Even in SBI, when we were on the board, 3 or 4 successive chairpersons were deeply involved in trying to change the culture of the organization to a customer-centric, a customer-friendly, and a company which is willing to take decisions quickly.
Thank
so
you
these
very
would
much,
be the
sir.
3 lessons
Thank you.
I would suggest.
Thank you. May I request you to kindly take your seat?
Yeah.
We are going to have the fireside chat now.
Yeah, sure.
So. And I will request Mr. Anil Valluri, Chairman of the Palo Alto Networks India. May I request you, sir, to kindly come and take your seat. And a huge round of applause for our 2 panelists here for the fireside chat, Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik and Mr. Anil Valluri. Warm welcome to you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bhaskar.
Thanks, Anil. Just for your information, Anil and I go back many, many years. We worked together in Digital Equipment Corporation. We worked together in Sun Microsystems. In fact, when I moved to the United States, Anil actually took over from me as the CEO of Sun Microsystems. And we remained friends ever since.
Thank you, Bhaskar. Thank you. I think it's a privilege and honor for me to have a fireside chat with you. Firstly, in my 40 years of working, I worked more than 1/3 with him. More than 15 years I've reported to him. Learned a lot. He's been a mentor, guru, what have you. And it's again distinct honor for me to be on the same stage with you and ask you a few questions. The idea is to get more out of you for the benefit of audience across business, across your leadership styles, across your favorite one-liners and so on. First, I would like to ask you about, you worked in, of course, for a short while in DCM. I worked with Ratan Tata in Nelco. I worked in DEC, which is one of the first multinational companies to shut up shop in India after Texas Instruments. Worked in Sun Microsystems, Microsoft, in between for a short while in Oracle. So, and then you graduated on to different boards across healthcare, across banks, across tech companies, services companies, and so on. And your experience is rich and varied. My question would be, for the benefit of audience, you navigated the whole punched card, mini computer, client server, internet and cloud eras. And you've seen it all happen in the last 50 years. And you wrote them very successfully. Professionally first and personally, how did you prepare? And then how did you navigate these different waves of technology, particularly in computing? Yeah.
I think this is the message I was trying to give, that we all talk about digital and technology and disruption, but as business managers, as custodians for our shareholders, we sometimes say, let's go use this technology. But that's really not the way technology has to be done. You don't use technology for technology's sake. Let's be very clear. And the reason for that is very clear, because technology has a shelf life of a banana. And I'd like to share this story about Microsoft. When Microsoft was formed by Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, the objective or the vision of Microsoft was to put a PC on everybody's table. That means every family in the world should own a PC. That was its goal, that was its objective. Now, in 2015, by and large, 25% of the world's population had a PC. So would you say that the company had fulfilled its purpose and therefore it should die? The answer was no, because new technology had come, the mobile technology, that gave far greater access to information than a PC could ever do. But Microsoft was not in the PC business, in the mobile phone business, that was Nokia. So therefore, again, the question which the board of Microsoft asked itself, do we need to die? Because we fulfilled our purpose, new technologies have taken over, and they're doing a better job of fulfilling the purpose. So what was the lesson I learned? The lesson I learned was that technology cannot be the reason why a company exists. A Palo Alto network cannot be because it's got the best firewall technology. It can be any other technology in future. It has to continually adapt. So the first thing which Satya Nadella did was to change the purpose of Microsoft, and he said that our purpose is to empower every individual and every enterprise on the planet to achieve more. Now just think about this purpose. It has got nothing to do with technology. So I think what is critical and what is important is to understand technology. I love it, I'm passionate about it, I keep myself abreast about it, but what I'm continuously looking for is what problems can it solve, either at the global level or at the business level. So I think that's the most important, that I'm a technologist, but I'm also a business person, I'm also a problem solver, and therefore, what is the most appropriate technology? And I learned that lesson, in Microsoft, it really came to the fore. It was a dying company in 2014, 2015, has been, and by 2024, it's now the largest company by market cap, including higher than Apple.
Follow-on to that question is, you worked in iconic companies such as DEC, which pioneered the mini computer, created the TCP/IP protocol, did pioneering work on networking, databases, including mail and so on, and integrating a lot of these things in different applications. So they were technology plus applications plus services. Sun was very different. It pioneered the whole concept of network is the computer. You need to go connect up to the value of the network is squared, the number of nodes that are connected to the network is the concept they promoted. And Microsoft, very different, and you articulated that about Microsoft. What's the difference? So two of them don't exist, DEC and Sun. Microsoft still exists. DEC and Sun evolved into another set of companies. DEC moved to Compaq to HP, Sun moved to Oracle. But what is the difference in their culture and GTM? We always talk of killer apps and so on, but what defined when they were so successful at that point in time? What was the one thing that you would say differentiated them on culture and GTM?
So I think if you look at Digital Equipment Corporation, which discovered the mini computer, it was so passionate. It was an engineering company. It focused on creating the best semiconductor chips, the processors. In fact, it was a lot of the digital technologies actually was taken over by Intel. But it was one of the most powerful companies creating and integrated mini computer systems, all the way from chips to the drives, to the CPUs, everything they were doing. And it was focused on engineering excellence and innovation. And their belief was that if the product is good enough, then people will line up and buy it. And that happened up to a certain point of time till the PC came. Because a mini computer still required a lot of IT professionals. A PC became something which any individual could operate. They did not see the future, and because of which their business came down dramatically, and finally they were also bought over, split up into multiple different companies and bought up by other companies. Their technology lives on. Their technology lives in companies like Intel, in Microsoft, in other parts. Their leaders also still exist. Now, if you look at Sun Microsystem, and remember, digital was a one-trick pony. That means it only had one success, which was a mini computer. Then came Sun Microsystems. It was successful on the workstations. It quickly became the #1 on workstations. And workstations in those days were basically used for mechanical CAD and drawings and stuff like that. And they made the best open source workstations in the world. Then they decided they'll move to servers because it became the era of client server. They foresaw that. And they said we can convert our knowledge of workstations into servers. And therefore, in the era of client server, they actually dominated that whole business. And then they said, yes, now the servers are becoming more and more powerful. We can put them into data centers and we can connect all the people to it. And that was the concept of the network is the computer and the beginnings of what we call cloud computing. So this was their constant innovation, looking at new opportunities, reinventing technology to suit those needs. Where did they go wrong? Their belief was that as long as hardware cannot be downloaded over the internet, our business model is safe. People will pay $20 million to buy our servers. When the dot-com bust happened in 2000, that's when their decline happened. Because people were not willing to pay that kind of money for very, very large servers. So that was their mistake. They reinvented themselves, but they got the business model wrong. So that was them. Now what happened in the case of Microsoft? I just told you the story. Microsoft, the PC was dead. They were flogging a dead animal. And that's why, while they were making lots of money by doing what is called attached to the PC, it took somebody to dramatically change the goal and the objective of the company and then come out with technology which propelled them into the era of the cloud, which is where they are now dominating. And then from there they went to AI. Microsoft today is not just one business. It is 10 businesses, each of greater than $20 billion. That's who they are. So DEC, single trick pony, Sun Microsystems, at least 3 products, and now Microsoft is 10 or 20 products. And they're managing it. Right, with a unified vision, common focus on the customer, focusing on consumption. They've changed everything. They changed the way they don't do software licensing anymore. Salespeople are not rewarded by how many licenses you sell. Whole thorough change. And the most important, the cultural change. Microsoft was an arrogant company. It believed it was always right. When Satya took over, it became a much more humble company. A company which doesn't just know it all, but a company wants to learn it all. That made a huge difference. And therefore, it's much more respected than it was before. So, lots of things which can happen, but I think this gives you a sense of, you can be the biggest and the best, but if you don't foresee the future, you don't foresee the trend, if you don't continuously innovate, even as a technology company, then you're doomed for failure. I just wanted to add one more thing. We talked about Elon Musk. Now think about Elon Musk. It's Elon Musk, and all his different companies are not part of one company, which gives him the agility. So he's got Tesla, he's got SpaceX, he's got the boarding company. Each one of them is focusing on solving a different problem, but each one has a different board of directors. It's a completely different companies and different shareholders. Each one of them has got different funding. Right, so that gives you room to maneuver, because the success of space Tesla does not necessarily, or if let's say Tesla wasn't successful, then it wouldn't have impacted SpaceX. And if SpaceX was not successful, it wouldn't have a problem on Tesla. So his structure is not as a conglomerate. It's as separate companies, each one solving a very specific kind of problem, and in the process creating even more opportunities, as we've heard today. I just thought that that was an interesting point which I wanted to share with you. Having one company trying to innovate everything and identifying new opportunities perhaps may not be the best way. The best way would be to create a separate company and a separate subsidiaries.
Interesting. One thing I want to pick your brain on. What happened to Java? It is supposed to be the software that runs the internet. Cloud companies and whole suite of applications survived on Java. People made money out of Java. But Sun pioneered and created Java. So why did they die? I mean, what happened to Java?
So Java still exists, and it still is one of the preferential programming languages for many organizations. But it's not the dominant one anymore. And that's the history of any kind of a technology. It dominates, it then comes down, the new ones come over. That has to be the case. In the case of Sun Microsystems, Java was an accident, but once it was there, they took the decision that they'll open source it and they'll give it away for free. Because like I said, the CEO of Sun Microsystems, he believed that you can download software for free. So why unnecessarily charge for software? Let's just charge for the hardware. But it turns out that that also was not the correct decision. But Java exists even till today.
So
you can get ChatGPT to write a Java program for you.
So they didn't monetize the whole Java
They didn't monetize it.
community.
Because they believe that you can only monetize hardware and not software.
Today's world, it looks so different. That's one crown jewel that they could have monetized, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, hardware is nothing. What about, you worked with Scott McNealy, Steve Jobs, Satya Nadella. How do you define their leadership styles? And you know, you had a ringside view, not just ringside view, but you worked personally with them. Not maybe Steve Jobs, but you have a good understanding of what Steve Jobs did. Between three of them, Scott, Steve Jobs, and Satya Nadella, how would you define their leadership styles?
So,
and I will have a follow-on question to that. Yeah.
So, if you think about Scott, Scott was very brash, very aggressive. I still remember he always used to poke fun at Microsoft. I don't know how many of you remember that era. So I remember once in Chennai, one of the press people asked him, why is it that you never talk about yourself, or Sun Microsystems, but you talk about Microsoft? He says, very simple, if I talked about Sun Microsystems, you wouldn't come and talk to me. If I talk about my competitor, you love to put it down on the press. So he said, that's why I do it, because you want me to do it. So anyway, that's the kind of person he was. But Scott was also believed in a culture where work and play were part and parcel of your job. So always the motto in Sun was kick butt and have fun, because that's who we are. And brash, aggressive, kick butt, be very persuasive. It was very focused on innovation. It was very focused on partnerships. I mean, it was one of the companies which fostered this whole concept of ecosystems, of having partners of different types who actually worked for you. So that was, Sun. If you look at Microsoft, and I'll talk more about it from a Satya Nadella perspective, because he changed and transformed it completely. This is a company which does everything on scale. It's not interested in anything which is one-off. It is interested in solving problems not at an individual company level, but at an industry level or at a global level. Everything about it is about solving problems at scale. Number two is, it is about engineering and innovation. That lives on from Bill Gates. So it is focused on always reinventing and creating something new, but protecting the legacy. It's very clear that any piece of code which Microsoft has ever written will run on the latest version. And that sometimes can create a problem, but that's the principle. It's a very empathic company, very focused on customers. The culture has changed where people want to learn, want to listen to the customer, and are willing to go back and then change their pattern or how they want to go about. Very much more flexible. And it's very clear, they also understand that competition is not to be envied, but competition, it's customers which are more critical. So in the Steve Ballmer days, we always used to say, we're going to kill this guy, we're going to kill that guy. Satya says nothing, let them do what they want. We will focus on our customers and give the customers what we want, not copy what others want to do. So it's a very innovative company, customer obsessed, very empathic, very, very customer friendly, and again driven by partners. If you look at
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, I've never had the opportunity to work with Steve Jobs, but he was obsessed by products, obsessed by customer, obsessed on engineering excellence, on quality, and he believed that the customer doesn't know what is good for him. He believed that he knew better than what the customer. He was also very, very aggressive in the Silicon Valley. But he was at the core, he was an inventor, creating something new in the same league as perhaps an Elon Musk. He challenged the current status quo.
Very interesting. So he didn't believe customers knew nothing. I mean.
Otherwise, all their products wouldn't have happened if you had asked a customer. If you ask a customer, did you, in those days it was a Walkman, and if you have gone and says that, what kind of music player would you require, they would have taken a Walkman and added a few frills here and there. But he came out with something called the iPod, which was completely revolutionized how songs were distributed.
So in your long career, picking from some of these leaders you worked with, what core belief systems that you had as a leader? It is all about inspiring people, leading them to path of success. What you believed is from a core standpoint, your belief system, what's few of them?
So I think what I've learned from all of them is that you've got to have a sense of purpose. You have to have a vision. You have to have a set of core values. And if you can stay true to all of those, and you can share that with the rest of the organization, then I think you can be very, very successful. So I think it's, success is teamwork. Success is not in a single individual, it's teamwork. It's heavily dependent on everybody believing in you, everybody believing in the same values, the same sense of purpose. And that's one thing I've learned. I've also learned that if you don't keep changing and innovating every 2 to 3 years, then you're obsolete. So even when I was in Microsoft, and even now, I ask myself, if I was in Sun, how would I have done this problem? How would I have solved this problem? And if the answer was the same as I would have done it in DEC, then I knew it was wrong. So even now on the boards of different companies which I am, and we look at the problems, like for example, I'm on the board of a very small finance bank. And I used to be on the board of State Bank of India. And whenever we have a problem and I ask myself this question, how did we solve it in SBI? It's just not appropriate to solve the same problem with Unity Finance Bank. Because they're much smaller. Their whole approach is different. The customers are different. So, you have to be very clear that over time, in the same company or over time in different companies, you have to change the way you look at things. And always ask yourself this question. I mean, one of the things about enjoying life is ask yourself, when was the last time you did something for the first time? I still do it at the age of 70. I'm always looking for those new experiences. So I still remember at the age of 70, I did a zip line. I enjoyed it. I haven't done it after that, but always look for that opportunity to do something new.
So we are running out of time. I have one last question. Kolkata is a cricket crazy city. I want to ask you something which you are not familiar with, but still, who's your favorite, Dhoni, Gavaskar or Ganguly?
Dhoni.
And why?
Dhoni.
And why?
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the 3 CEOs, right? So if I think about Scott McNealy, brash, aggressive, challenging the status quo, wanting everybody to have a good time, that's short of Ganguly. That's the way he captained. If you think about Satya Nadella, thoughtful, strategic, always working with his people, very clear-cut strategy and intent, that's Dhoni. And if you look at Gavaskar, it is about excellence. I mean, he was a batsman par excellence. He was very good both on the strategy and the tactical side, very measured. That was digital. A guy called Ken Olsen. Very measured.
Thank you.
So, I always look for these comparisons, but cricket is a good way to look at leadership styles, and you'll find the parallels in the industry.
Thank you, Bhaskar. I think we are done with the time, but thank you. It's a great honor to be with you.
No, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik and Mr. Anil Valuri. May I request Mr. Didi Prokastha, Director of AVP Private Limited, to kindly come forward and felicitate both our speakers here today. Thank you very much, Mr. Anil Valuri, Chairman of Palo Alto Networks India. Thank you very much, sir. We'd also like to request Mr. Didi Prokastha to felicitate Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. To both our speakers, we'd like to request you to take your seat in the hall, and I'd thank you, Mr. Didi Prokastha, Director of ABP Private Limited. Thank you very much, sir. And now, ladies and gentlemen, hold on, because we have another very interesting session coming up, the fireside chat, and this is again going to be interesting for all of you, because we have two wonderful industry leaders. They're going to take us through their journey, and they're also going to share with us a lot of what they think about their work and also some of the solutions that they are going to come up with. We are just taking a minute to do the setup, so please bear with us. We have a long day ahead, so gear up, because we are going to present to you some wonderful, wonderful people of the industry who are going to come up with very interesting nuances that you can take home. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for this fireside chat as I request Mr. Sanjay Hiranandani, MD of .1 Solutions, to kindly come forward and take a seat. Along with him is Mr. Richard Whittington. Please give him a round of applause. He is the Global Head Media, Sports and Telecommunications, SAP. And Mr. Whittington has a broad cross-functional background and cross-industry experience base in sales, services, marketing solutions, management and operations. Over to both the gentlemen here. Sir.
Thank you so much. So firstly, let me take this opportunity to congratulate ABP and Brand INFOCOM for its 23rd edition. I've had the proud privilege of being associated with all the previous 22 editions of INFOCOM, and I think it's getting bigger and better. Fantastic. So many congratulations. Let's hear it for ABP and Brand INFOCOM, yeah? Richard, it's an absolute proud privilege to have you here. I know you had a very difficult journey coming into India, landed at 3:30 this morning, and I think when you landed, disruption was on your mind because your bag did not land with you, right? So you still need to get your bag, is that correct?
Yeah, talking about a little disruption, there was a sort of a hiccup in the aviation logistics supply chain with my bag. So normally I would have a little bit more formal clothing on, but yeah, it was a It's a long trip from Los Angeles over the last 2 days, but I'm really, really happy to be here.
Wonderful. It's great to have you here. So the overall theme of this INFOCOM is sustainable disruption. Given your position as the head of SAP for media, entertainment, sport, and communication business, which is always going through disruption, can you define what sustainable disruption means to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of life. I think Mr. Basha, the last speaker, talked a little bit about reinventing yourself. My particular background is I was in consulting as a management consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and if you weren't relevant, you couldn't bill. So it was a very, very short line between relevancy and getting paid. So I've always kind of carried that through with my career. At SAP, you know, we faced an inflection point, much like Digital or DEC, or some of the other companies like Sun that we were mentioning just now, and that was we needed to shift to the cloud as a consumption model. And, you know, like all transformations, it wasn't painless. In fact, at times, it was painful, and, you know, to this day, we are still constantly transforming. So I think for me, sustainable transformation, and if you look at the industries I focus on, we have 25 industries at SAP, which cover about 70% of the world's gross domestic product in terms of companies. A small little aside here. While I was prepping for this morning, I was very self-conscious about the fact that I'm very casually dressed. But the good news is everything I'm wearing is made by an SAP customer. And that was pure coincidence and luck, but it just shows the reach across all these industries. And what that does for us is it gives us a very unique perspective about trends that are coming out across multiple industries. So for example, I joined SAP to run media. You know, it's very clear that sports, and by the way, I grew up in England, so I do understand cricket, but please do not ask me about favorites. But, you know, having that sort of point of view of these industries merging, it's not a secret that telcos are trying to decide what to do with the massive bandwidth. I mean, if you think of the growth of Netflix, you know, the telcos didn't really make any money out of that. They just provided the highways and the infrastructure for the media companies to make that money. And what we've seen, if I drill down on, you know, there's a couple obviously global things that are going on. I mean, we just had an election in the US. You might have heard of that one. We also, you know, we have a couple of wars going on, which is very tragic. And we also have, you know, countries that are moving to an inflationary period. And so that puts a lot of pressure on companies that are wanting to transform to do it at a cost point that makes sense for them. So I guess if I wrapped it up, my industry, media, sports, telco, particularly media, in the last 2-3 years, thanks to an upstart called Netflix, has gone through massive change. We went through, you know, the pandemic, which led to a very accelerated role of streaming as a consumption media. I think we now provide software that manages over 300 million global subscribers on streaming services. We, you know, basically have seen that. We've seen the movement away from hard media. We have a conversation tomorrow with our esteemed print customers from India tomorrow about how we help them move to a digital-first, cloud-based world. And so that constant change is something we're seeing every single day. And you know, to Mr. Basha's point, it keeps me excited, it keeps me relevant, and it keeps me wanting to push the envelope every time on behalf of SAP, who, back again, using a reference from the previous speaker, our purpose is to make the world better. And that's why every, you know, SAP person gets up and tries to drive transformation every day.
Wonderful, Richard. So, Richard, we are sitting in an event that addresses the CIO and CTO community. And obviously in this room, we've got some eminent CIOs and CTOs who are sitting here. AI has become a word that is on top of mind of everyone. Right. So do you think AI is both sustainable and going to bring in disruption? And how are some of your customers dealing with it?
Yeah, I mean, if you've been asleep for the last year if you haven't heard of AI, right? I think from our perspective, it's really about the relevancy of AI and the embedding of the AI in the business process. AI for AI's sake, yes, we all use ChatGPT. It's a wonderful tool. There are several other ones. Perplexity is one I use. There are several tools out there, but we have a different view on it at SAP. We believe that AI has to be relevant, it has to be responsible, and it has to be really governed in a way that it's reliable. And so what we are doing as part of our journey to AI is embedding AI into the business processes. And all of us know that the value of AI is only as good as the value of your data. And we believe, because of our position across these industries, because of our position inside a lot of these companies' financial and supply chains and HR processes, that if we can embed that AI into the process, we will make it easier for people to do work. And I think that's the fundamental business value, if you like, of work. Now, one thing we've done, which is interesting as a best practice, I believe, is we have set up an ethics committee at SAP. And so no piece of AI that is anything other than vanilla will go to market unless it's been approved by the ethics committee. We value the power of AI, but we are respectful of the social responsibility to manage AI in a way that helps people rather than threatens them. And so that's a very important part. If I take a couple of examples, which is finance related, we've embedded AI with a product called Joule, which helps you use natural language questions. For example, what sales did I do in that region last week? Comes up, rather than trying to write a complex query, comes up as a natural language response. And we've gone to a world where we don't want to own large language models, but we own the data inside the companies that run their businesses. And there's a responsibility that goes with that too, in terms of the degree to which you expose that to the outside AI world. An interesting one we're doing, to use the sports analogy, is we're working with Bayern Munich. There's a tremendous amount of talent finding, development, coaching, and assessment that goes on in professional sports. I use football, aka soccer if you're in the US, as the example. We are working with the coaches there. When they use their iPad to record a lot of data about players, we are making AI-based recommendations on where that player would best fit into the team. And so we're sort of taking something that was done, but it was done very slowly, manually, and using the power of AI within the business process, in other words, in terms of talent development, to move that process along. So that's one example. Another example that we're doing that's embedded into the HR process is we're helping match the right candidate to the right job a lot easier. We're helping recruiters write better job descriptions. We're helping applicants write better responses to those job applications by embedding the AI into the HR business process. And lastly, you could think about smart procurement, you could think about more predictive supply chain management using these AI tools. So we're just on the cusp of it. Quick couple of data points. If you were at Sapphire, our conference in Orlando in May, we had about 50 AI use cases in the product. Today, that's 100. So you can see this pace of development is phenomenal. But with that comes the responsibility I talked about.
I think the Bayern Munich example that you talked about is fascinating.
Yeah.
One could never imagine that it would get there that fast. Continuing on the topic of AI, AI has several societal challenges and opportunities. How is SAP managing the great power of AI with greater impacts of using it properly?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about the ethics committee. I think that's really important. I think as you set up your organizations to do AI, that responsibility, that having a mechanism to say, does this make sense? Or am I just doing it because I need to say I do AI? So I think that's an important part of it for me. Other than that, I think it's, there's only other one point in my career, and my career is quite long too. I remember sitting, when I was back in healthcare, I was sitting in a room with a Deloitte consultant, and it was late at night because we always build late, right? And I asked the guy, what are you doing? And he said, I'm working on something internally. And what it was, for those of you old enough to remember, was Mosaic, which was an internet browser. And I was watching this guy work, and I said to him, and I wish I bought a lot of URLs, I said to him, Mark, this is going to change the world. And it did. And I have that same feeling about AI right now, that, I'm using it on a daily basis. I use it to summarize, I use Copilot from Microsoft, I use it to summarize all my emails, I use it to reply to some of them. I've used a tool called Synthesia to create training videos with avatars, and just watching their product develop in the last year has been phenomenal. So it's becoming more and more lifelike that people in training situations can use avatars to scale, because it's also about scale. But I think that's probably the best answer I have to that question.
Wonderful. In fact, that was going to be my next question. As a senior executive of SAP, how do you use AI in your daily work? So you've already answered that.
Yeah, and also, look, the old guy has got to be the smart guy, right? So, and I mean that in a way that I don't want to ever feel that I'm irrelevant. And so I have to force myself, back to Mr. Basher earlier, force myself to learn this stuff. And it's fun, to be honest. I mean, I had a blast making the video. We had to do a presentation, a TED Talk, to our new boss. And I used an AI avatar inside, and people asking me, where did you get the head count for that person? And I knew at that point I was onto something that was going to win.
Wonderful. So Richard, let's try and take this a little forward. How is SAP handling sustainable disruption, given your clean core strategy?
Yeah, and to answer this question, let me rewind a little bit. I came to SAP for a year 15 years ago. So when I came, it was an ERP company that did finance, who did supply chain, we did a bit of HR, but it was very verticalized. It was, you know, you had an IS finance application, you had an IS leasing application, IS media, and I know that's a painful spot for some of the people in the room, I understand. But it was very limiting. So if you were a Starbucks, for example, and you were in retail, you couldn't run a finance business. You couldn't run, which they are, they're bank, you know, they have about $1 billion at any one time on deposit with the Starbucks app. And so what we have done, as I talked about a little, the transformation we've done at SAP, is we stepped back and we've said the fundamental aspect of this is what is known internally and externally as a clean core. And by that I mean, don't handicap yourself by putting too much industry functionality into your core. Because look, if I use an analogy of my iPhone or my iPad, you're constantly getting app updates, right? If you didn't have a standard core and you had a lot of customizations in it, you can't take advantage of all that innovation. And so we're a cloud-first company, which means cloud qualities, which means constant innovation, and it means that ability to isolate yourself from the industry-specific things. Now, you say, but I have to run a business. And so the extensibility of that clean core through our platform called Business Technology Platform, BTP, allows you, yourself, your developers, or your partners, or ecosystem partners, it allows you to extend that clean core to cope with the nuances of business processes in your specific industry. So we quickly realized that our cost of goods sold, our strategic competitors, were not building industry-specific vertical solutions. They were going for a clean core that enabled you to continually invest, and if I bring the AI topic into this, to take advantage of our investments in that by not having to look at a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year upgrade program.
Fantastic. So then what would be your advice to customers who are in the process of embarking on this digital journey? So what would be your playbook?
Yeah,
what would be SAP's playbook on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you Richard's point of view first. Right. I mean, I'm very blessed and honored to be on a number of executive steering committees for some very large transformations in music, in home entertainment and streaming, and you know, multidisciplinary media companies. And so one of the things that I get to observe and learn is that fundamentally, it's still about the people, right? We have, and I think Mr. Basher said that, we have these technologies, but it's still about the people and getting the people motivated and willing to change and to understand the necessary pain that goes with that change, because it's not pain-free. But the thing I see most successful when I sit on these different steering committees, and for obvious reasons I can't name them, right? Those that have a grip on the program, those who have a grip on the change management aspect of it, those who have a grip on the communications aspect of it, and again, AI can help them with that, those who really understand the role of technology in the bigger picture, and there's still some sort of bread and butter things like the business case and realization of benefits that you have to have, but it's really the change on the people. And even from our own perspective, as an example, we've gone through a lot of change in all our industries. We have change ambassadors whose job it is really to keep their finger on the pulse in a non-management line of reporting, combined with surveys, to really understand what the heartbeat is. Because, again, I'll borrow from Mr. Basher, if you don't have purpose, if you don't have the people behind you, you can have the best technology in the world, you're still not going to win.
So that's wonderful, Richard. You're almost running out of time. and you've got to sustain the next few hours without your bag over here in your casual clothes. So thank you so much for making it all the way from LA and for being part of INFOCOM. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me, Sanjay. And Sanjay's been a great partner. I think one of the things we also heard from some of the success of other companies in a previous speaker was it's about the ecosystem and it's about partnering and the ability for partners like Dot One and Sanjay to leverage this clean core concept by using technologies such as BTP is really the key to success. And I would embrace that if I was in your shoes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Do you want to question?
Thank you very much, sir. May I request Mr. Dhruva Mukherjee, CEO of AVP Group, to kindly come forward to do the felicitations. Thank you very much, Mr. Richard Whittington. Thank you very much, sir. And Mr. Sanjay Hiranandani for this very interesting fireside chat. Thank you very much, sir. We'd request the gentlemen here present here to kindly take their seats in the hall. We will be starting with the technology keynote. Please give us a minute to do the setup and we are good to go. Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting off with a keynote on technology, and I will request Mr. Biswajit Das, Head Data and AI, AWS India and SOC, to kindly come over and take on the stage.
Put it on.
Please put your hands together for Mr. Biswajit Das, Head Data and AI, AWS India and SOC, as he comes on stage to deliver his technology keynote. It's going to be very interesting.
Hey, good morning. Is it afternoon? Just about good afternoon. This is the only city where I can come up on stage and say, hi, my name is Bishwajit Das, because nowhere else do people really understand that. So thank you so much. I love coming back to the city. But you've caught me on a bad day. I've got a head cold, and I'm not thinking straight. And obviously, you know, if you find me not as articulate as you would want, you know who to blame this, right? But thank you for having me here. I think this is one of the best gathering of tech folks in the east of India that happens every year. It's almost like a tech folks pilgrimage, right? One of the things you'll find Amazonians do is when we come up on stage and introduce ourselves, we tell you something a little peculiar about ourselves, right? So here goes mine. So I started my career as a bartender, as a full-time bartender. I am not engineer. I'm not a business graduate. That's my only formal education, right? So that immediately makes me the most undereducated person in the room. So you should take some, confidence out of that. So I keep getting asked this question saying, Biswa, from a bartender to the head of data and AI business for AWS, ये कौन सा दिवाली लॉटरी खरीदा था आपने जिसमें आपका ये निकला? To the extent that it almost became an existential question for me. So if you have ever had the misfortune to hear me speak before, this is something that I keep banging on about, I think data being the genesis of all innovation. And while I was doing a little research on this is what I found, right? Any idea what this is? Anyone? Don't worry, it's not a fair question. It's obviously a tablet. But this is said to be the first known recorded data in human history. This somewhere from 1400, 1500 BC in what is now southern Iraq, Mesopotamia, right? Southern Iraq. And like every priceless historical object, if you want to see it today, you'll have to go to the British Museum in London, which is where it is. But what's interesting is, what is this a record of, right? So this is actually a record of the amount of wine given out to laborers. And that's when I figured, alcohol and data has been fueling innovation for centuries, and serendipitously I ended up at the right place doing what I do for a living, right? But innovation is a very bandied around word, Everybody talks about it, often misused. But if I asked you to close your eyes and visualize innovation, more often than not, this is what you think of, right? This one shiny Eureka spark moment where you had this life-changing idea which is going to be God's gift to humankind. But actually, if you zoomed in, this is what innovation looks like. It's that one moment where you connect these hundreds and thousands and millions of dots in your head. These data points come from experience, education, nature, nurture, even from genetic memory, right? And why we are able to do this is because the human brain is just this amazing pattern matching machine, right? And everything that we do at AWS Data and AI is to enable organizations and enterprises such as yourselves to be able to behave like a human brain. And at the forefront of this, very obviously, is AI. And oh my God, isn't everybody talking about it? Is there anybody in the room who doesn't have a mandate to do something with AI? He's like, man, nahi karega AI. Aisa, anybody in the room? Just doesn't happen, right? And don't believe me, this is a brilliant website. You should go and see this. This is OECD. They track AI news as it is happening in real time. There's obviously a screen grab focused on India. You can zoom out, zoom in, etc. The rate at which people are talking about AI is just mind-boggling, right? And therefore, each board has this mandate of saying we need to do something with AI, right? But what I thought today when I was invited by Shubham and INFOCOM to come and talk about here is, you don't need me to tell you about what AI or Gen AI can do. You can internet search that thing, right? It'll give you better information than I can. I'm a human being, right? I thought, why don't I answer questions that I generally get when I'm on stage. Maybe that would be of more use. So one of the questions is, and I speak to a lot of my CIO friends, and they keep telling me, there's this thing that I call the pilot purgatory. You go to anyone and they say, hey, listen, I'm doing 8 POCs on AI and Gen AI. And then 3 months later, ask them, how many went to production? The answer generally is none, right? And therefore, the idea is, from our experience, where have we seen this being done successfully, right? So I'm going to try and break this down and from what we have seen from our experience. I think the first place where this is really working well in Gen AI is when we use it to enhance experience. It can be internal, it can be directly to your end customers, etc. For example, how many travelers in the house? Have you used Condé Nast before? So I remember when I was young and me and my wife would travel to a new country, new place, we would carry this thick book which would have underlined places of things to do, places to see, right? Obviously the young folks in the room have no clue what I'm talking about, but it used to exist. There used to be this Condé Nast guidebook, right? And they had years and years of experience of figuring out where all of these offbeat, beautiful travel experiences were. So what they did is they put it all together and gave it in the hands of their customers, who could ask the app to create offbeat travel experience for themselves. Otherwise, you would have spent hours doing internet research, or if you're lazy like me, you would have just outsourced it to a travel agency, right? And therefore, the experience, the joy of discovering your own itinerary just is brilliant. And if you're a traveler, you'll know half the joy is in figuring out what you're going to do on your next vacation, right? The other place that we see a lot of, exponential gain coming out is efficiency. And I know nobody likes to talk about it, right? This is the non-glamorous part of technology. I mean, what efficiency? But I mean, let me give you an instance. Anyone heard of Intuit? If you've ever worked in the US market, I mean, Intuit is the platform for tax for everyone, right? So what they did this year is they put together the years of tax knowledge together. And during tax season, all their customers, whether they are institutions or whether they are individual customers, they could ask it questions regarding saying, hey, what was my tax position last year? Why do my return seems higher, lower, etc., and it give them answers. Now you would think this is a no-brainer. What's the big deal about it? This year's tax season, Intuit saved 380,000 hours of call center time. If anybody here is in the BPO, KPO industry, do the math. 380,000 hours by the amount, by the dollar number for each minute, each hour. That's a massive amount of saving, number one. It is also a beautiful experience for customers to not have to call up, wait in queue, ask questions that might not be answered, etc., etc. So self-service, right? It worked brilliantly well. The third place where we see a lot of stuff happening is if this will work, yes, what I have very unsuccessfully, because I wanted 3 E's there, so I've called it experimental, but what I meant was things that we have never done before, right? Let me think of someone. Look up this company. They have this beautiful model called ESM2, right? They created the first artificial fluorescent protein known to mankind. It's more than 50%, it mimics more than 50% of what's found in nature. You know what the amazing thing is though? That if we had let Mother Nature take its own route to evolving this protein from scratch, it would have taken 500 million years. Just take a moment to grasp that number. 500 million years for it to naturally evolve. And these are things we could have never imagined doing if it wasn't for AI and Gen AI, right? So if you're looking at a use case, if they fit into one of these 3, if they fit into your business plan, that's where you should really go to, I think. The other question that I'm constantly asked is, where do I start with my Gen AI strategy? Do you have a Gen AI strategy? Is it largely my board says you need to do something in Gen AI, and therefore can I build a chatbot? So I think this is one of those technologies where the question is not whether it's going to really take off. It is going to take off. Believe me, I spent years doing technology. I've never seen such a compressed innovation cycle in my entire life. It's going to change a lot of how we work, what we do, etc., right? But I think the first point for an organization, for their strategy, should be to figure out where, where they sit on this entire value chain, right? So imagine an inverted pyramid, and this is where I should have had a snazzy infograph showing an inverted pyramid, but I'm a lazy slide maker, so forgive me. So think of an inverted pyramid. At the very, very top layer are organizations who will use Gen AI embedded into applications and systems that they already use. So you use, let's say you use your CRM systems, you use your Marcom systems, you use your distribution network systems, ERP systems, etc. And they will embed Gen AI into those applications. So you really don't need to bother what LLM, what infrastructure, what model, etc. Right? They will do it. You will just do the end use of that, consumers of that, right? Just below that will be organizations who will, and I hate this word, but I dislike this word, but let's say, for want of something better, who will use prompt engineering to figure out outputs for themselves, who will ask the right questions to get the right answers, right? Just below that will be organizations who will say, listen, but I have a very typical data set in my industry, my business, and therefore I need contextual answers from my organization, my industry. And then they will use various techniques such as RAG, vectoring, etc., to be able to get contextual answers from the data. Just below that will be organizations who say, this model almost works for me. Can I just tweak bits and pieces of it to make it more relevant? And at the very end of that inverted pyramid will be this very small set of organizations who will say, I'll create my own foundation model. Now, this entire thing is inversely proportionate to time, effort, and money. The lower you go in the pyramid, the more time, more effort, and more money you need to spend. The moment you figure out, and you'll probably overlap between 2 or 3 layers, where are you as an organization really going to work? And it also decides what sort of talent you need to acquire, what sort of platforms you need to work with, right? And therefore, then what sort of modernization of your data estate that you need to do. The third question that I'm constantly asked is this, right? Saying, anybody has an answer to this question? Anybody wants to take a punt at this, saying which is the best foundational model, which is the best LLM? This is a technical question, it deserves a technical answer, right? So have you heard of this beautiful principle called intransitive superiority? Don't worry, I'm glad if you haven't heard, good, you haven't wasted geeky time on figuring this out. But a beautiful example of intransitive superiority in technical terms is rock, paper, scissors, right? In linear thinking, if A is better than B and B is better than C, then A is better than C. Is that what happens in rock, paper, scissors? It doesn't, right? And therefore, it's the same with foundational models. The foundational model which is right for one use case might not be right for the second use case. So use horses for courses. And if you are going big bang on Gen AI, one of the fundamental principles of a design should be the ability to swap out models at some point of time in its lifetime. Because believe me, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months down the line, there is going to be another model which will be faster, cheaper, better. And you'll rue the day that you didn't put that into a design element, right? The clock shows me 5 minutes, and I'm going to just run through all of this. So I know that, AI, everybody wants to build this beautiful looking AI applications, but if you actually looked under it, right, there's a whole lot of foundational work that is necessary to actually deploy this in production. If you don't have any of this, it is the pilot purgatory that you're looking at. Nothing happens. Let me take some example from human technology which changed, let's say an internal combustion engine, right? It changed the way humankind transports itself. Have you ever seen somebody buy an internal combustion engine, get up on it and drive away? Has that ever happened? Somebody needed to build the chassis, the carburetor, the radiator. Come on, somebody needed to build the windshield wiper and the air conditioning and the seats, right? And therefore, it is important that we create the large ecosystem that enables us to do AI at scale, because otherwise we are going to be left with a couple of POCs, maybe one or two small use cases, nothing at scale, right? I'm going to come back to something personal. I have huge imposter syndrome. Almost every day, at some point of time, I think, do I really deserve to be here? Aren't there so many better people to do this for a living than me, right? And then I also think, whatever am I doing, whatever I'm doing for a living, does it really impact anybody at all? I mean, obviously, I'm not delusional. I know that I'm not looking for the cure to cancer, right? I'm pushing buttons. But does it really impact anybody at all? And this is our mission in India, right? We say we are empowering builders and organizations to build a better India. And we've been around for a while. So one fine day I sat and I thought, I'm an average Indian. Can I look at one day in my life and figure out if anything that me, my team, my organization has done, does it really make any difference to anybody's life? And here is what I found out, right? When I'm woken up by Alexa to the first bowl of cereal that I have, very obviously I don't go to the gym, but if I did, the clothes I'd wear, and when I'd go to do my workout, where I get my news, whether it's in English, in vernacular, and I fortunately don't have to shave every day, but if I did, the blade that I'd use, right? And when I do any of it, there is an AWS data and AI customer who actually touches my life. And then when I go to office, if you're like me, if you are at an airport every day, and who hasn't used, if you haven't used Digiyatra, you should. It's one of the best things I have seen in air transport globally. It's probably not there anywhere in the world, right? Or maybe you take a train, maybe I take a train, get a ride-hail car, right? Drive myself, and even the tires that drive my car, right? And when I do any of this, there is an AWS data and AI customer who actually touches my life, right? And then I get to office, whether it's my CRM systems, whether it's my marketing systems, whether it's my accounting systems, and so many of these other applications that you and I both use in office. And when I'm doing any of that, there is one of my customers who actually touches my life. And then when you take that small break in the middle of the day, from the food that you order to how you pay for it, sneak in that chai cigarette break, do some tax work, do some bank work. And when I do any of that again, right, I suddenly find that I have an AWS data and AI customer who actually touches my life. And then when I go back home in the evening, if you're like me, you'd like to put your legs up, get a drink. And if you're getting a drink, you want some chakna with it. So, you know, Calcutta Zone, Haldiram, right? Maybe Netflix and chill. And why just Netflix and chill? Go crazy on all the streaming services there. Maybe plan the next, help your kids with their coursework, right? Plan your next vacation. Book a ticket for the next day's cricket match. Play fantasy cricket. Or when, like me, when it's my turn to cook, just order food, right? And when you do any of that, there is obviously an AWS data and AI customer who touches my life. And then when I wind down for the evening, have that last medicine delivered to me, read a little, hear a little soundscape to drift me off to sleep in that wonderfully soft mattress. So from dawn till I go to sleep, almost every moment of my life, there is an AWS data and AI customer who actually touches my life, right? And why am I telling you all this? I keep saying, only doing is doing. But the next best thing is when we see our peers, our colleagues, our friends in this country do all of this in data and AI, we know that this is not a science fiction future that we are talking about, right? And it gives you tremendous power of conviction to be able to go out and experiment, because believe me, like I said, it's not science fiction. The future right now is where we build, right? Thank you so much. I love myself. It just blinked into zero. I finished on time. You've been a great, patient audience. I love coming to your city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biswajit Das. May I request you to stay on stage, please? And I will request Mr. Shubhamoy Chakraborty to kindly come on stage. Mr. Shubhamoy is the CTO of ABP Private Limited and Joint Secretary INFOCOM. We'd like to thank you, Mr. Biswajit Das, for this very, very interesting session. Thank you, sir. We request you to take your seats in the hall. And ladies and gentlemen, we will start off with the next fireside chat. We're taking a minute to do the setup. The name of this fireside chat is Driving Transformation and Disruption in the Digital Era. And we have two very interesting industry leaders who are going to initiate this chat, who's going to take us through different stories, who is going to give us some learning, and we are going to take these home as our skills for this day. Once again, I would request all of you to please post your stories and give the hashtags accordingly, because we are present there on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on X. So please present your stories and tag us so that we can see that you're enjoying yourselves and you're having a great time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start off with the fireside chat, Driving Transformation and Disruption in the Digital Era. I would like to request Mr. Ambarish Dasgupta, Senior Partner and Founder in Theory Consulting LLP, who is going to be in conversation with Mr. Avinash Joshi, CEO, NTT Data India. May I request both the gentlemen here to kindly come forward and take their seats. And a round of applause from the audience, please, as these two industry leaders take on the stage. Thank you for being here with us today, and I hand over the session to Mr. Ambarish Dasgupta. So.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really quite pleased and honored to be in a fireside chat with Avinash, the CEO of NTT Data. I still wonder why in Calcutta, right now going 27, 28 degrees centigrade, we call it a fireside chat. Yeah, should at least have been in the night than to really give this name a meaning. Thanks, Avinash, for being here. Wouldn't really like to keep the fireside chat very much confined to what NTT does, but rather, since NTT is such a large organization and that gives you an opportunity to meet with the various board level people, the management. So we may like to take this session a little beyond technology to the strategic users of technology in India. But before we get into that, maybe we would just love to start about NTT and NTT Data, the global organization, the Japanese entity, then the 3 units which you have. Since in East, the presence is, maybe the awareness is there, but not so much as it was for about NTT all around India. So could you just brief us about the whole entity, their vision, what they do?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for having me here, Amrish, for ABP Group to invite me for this discussion. Spend a few minutes on NTT, what we are. So we are a Japanese group. Most of us may have known a brand called Docomo. which used to be in India before as a Tata Docomo brand, and that was our mobile service brand.
Yep.
Our history, heritage is about 150 years old in Japan. Globally, our business is about $100 billion, $100 billion business of telco and IT services. The IT services business, which is entity data, that's about $30 billion globally. So sometimes we all joke that this is one of the best kept secret we have, that we actually have a $30 billion business globally. Partly, I think, why it is lesser known because after we were allowed to go outside of Japan in year 2000, then we started a lot of inorganic growth across various geographies. And true to the Japanese philosophy and management style, while the stakes were taken by entity, but those companies pretty much ran independent, autonomous, under various different names. So example, NetMagic in India was way back a net entity company. Dimension Data in India was an entity company. Dell Services was an entity company. So all these various different companies globally, we acquired since 2000, and the last count is 97. So 97 different companies are acquired, and as a result, we form as a group. Today, entity data as a group is end-to-end comprehensive portfolio, right from infrastructure, connectivity, applications, and now Gen AI data. So we generally are better known for our data center presence in India, and we have one of the leading position. But it's not only that, we also manage IT and applications for our clients. We do digital transformation. This is the topic today. And now we have some recent wins around even Gen AI. So think about us as a end-to-end most comprehensive portfolio. Just one last point about Kolkata. We actually have a reasonable presence in Kolkata. So UCO Bank is our client, National Insurance Company is our client, and few others. And we are expanding our presence in this part of the world because we think that there is a potential here for us to grow our business.
That's something really wonderful that you are expanding your presence in the East. But now, moving more to the general subject of the digital transformation, since as I understand entity data, both are an end-to-end transformation, consulting, implementation organization, it always crosses my mind that what's the difference between the digital transformation of the yesteryears and the digital transformation of today? Because like I was jokingly talking to DDP, Mr. Prakash, so that digital transformation you have also been doing for your whole group when you were the MD. Maybe Dhruva also is now doing digital transformation when he is the MD. So what's the difference between the digital transformation of the yesteryears and that we are doing today?
I think the fundamental shift we are noticing in the digital transformation is it has gone now a lot more at the front of the business. So the involvement of not only the technology function within the company or enterprise, but the line of businesses, whether it's marketing, sales, operational technology, HR, legal. So line of businesses have started getting a lot more involved in the digital transformation than what it used to be in the past. That's one development. I think the second is the CEOs and CFOs actually are asking a lot more about the ROI on the transformation than what it used to be in the past. Because I think businesses are trying to grow at the front end by giving the best of the best client experience. And for them to give that best of the best client experience, they need to invest in the front end technologies. And for that, they need to save cost from business as usual, so to speak, IT technologies, right? So there is this whole conversation about also what's the ROI on the digital transformation. So these are the two fundamental changes I see.
Yeah, well, that's quite a right observation. My profession previously and what I'm doing now, because of being a thoroughly into the management consulting and strategy may not always actually take me only to the CIO or the CDO, but makes me interact with the other types of KMPs also. Now, there are little varied sense or understanding about a digital absorption or a transformation from, say, president of marketing to the president of IT to the president of procurement and all. So it varies. I mean, somebody is seeing maybe the elephant's tusk, somebody is seeing the elephant's tail. But now possibly we are more moving into an enterprise-wide digital transformation. Now, question to you, having worked in other countries, working in a large global setup, what we mean here as a digital transformation in India for a large organization, or the kind of adoption we have, is it very different than what Japan does, particularly Japan, since you are headquartered in Japan, or maybe the other country they consider?
It's interesting you asked that question. I have an experience of working for an American company before working here, and I see sometimes the difference in the approach, I would say Oriental versus Western approach even to the business. But what I have noticed fundamentally what happens differently in Japan is two things. One is extraordinary planning and a clarity of what is the outcome we are expecting. I think that is a lot more rigorous in Japan compared to, let's say, our part of the world, where we want to be more faster, agile, innovative, not necessarily, great planning. And at times, as a result, sometimes our goalpost changes because we have not planned enough what exactly we want to achieve. So I think that is one difference. The second difference, what I see is every conversation in our headquarters or in that society is whatever digital transformation, whatever innovation we are doing, are we doing it responsibly for the good of society? That, and you probably know this more than me, but that generally you don't hear in our conversations here about the impact of whatever we are doing. What's the impact of that for the society or a community? And I think it is very interesting that that view comes into the discussion, that whatever we are doing, is it sustainable? Is it good for? There is a term called sampoyoshi. That's a Japanese term, but basically it means whatever you do, it should be good for seller, it should be good for buyer, and it should be good for community. So I think I see that as a difference. And of course, then there's another thing, and that's basically because of, I guess, the demography, the societal problems. But a lot more digital transformation in Japan right now is related with, let's say, dealing with convenience of elderly, what you need to do, and how the technology can help for the demography what Japan is right now going through, right? I mean, we have a lot more younger population, so our digital transformation is, I think, a lot more on end user convenience for the mobile world, whereas I think in Japan you see digital transformation, or for that matter security or AI, lot more inclusive, I would say.
Yeah. Yes, that's one thing we see definitely amongst the Indian boards also. The convergence of the various technologies sometimes is becoming very perplexing and confusing for them, because they say that we are hearing AI, Gen AI. Within Gen AI, there are a number of tools like Claude, Perplexity, Copilot, all those things that's there. Then we have quantum computing, we have AR, we have VR, we have the edge computing, so many things that I can understand that a non-tech board person, they actually keep on hearing. And they sometimes feel that I'm hearing all these things, but I'm not being able to use the convergence of this to a proper business benefit or to the creation of a huge sustainable technology-induced business development. Sometimes it just becomes a plaything. Sometimes it just becomes a very pocketed kind of thing, like an applicability of a Copilot to check my emails is not basically a transformation. So do you think that now the Indian companies, at least whom you are working with, has come out of that stage and can really think about this huge convergence of technology, making a sweeping enterprise-wide transformation, and still remains a very pocketed plaything kind of a tool?
You know, if I step back a little bit, it's really incredible the amount of experimentation is happening right now in Indian businesses. All the enterprises, small, large, medium, irrespective of the size, everybody is looking at something or other to experiment in the GenAI space. Now, of course, most of them probably started with Copilot and email and getting the summary of PPTs and things like that. But I think very soon we see that Indian organizations have started moving to the real use cases, or at least wanting to know the real use cases. We have some engagements going on right now where we are helping clients in assisting the research effort. Can you reduce the time taken, just the plethora of information the researchers have to go through before they can come to a particular conclusion. So we are using GenAI in that front. We have another engagement happening around enhancing the client experience by using conversational AI. There is another conversation happening about what can we do in whole legal compliance regulation, and how do you use GenAI for that, right? I think there are two things, the Indian enterprises might not have looked seriously yet. One is, it is easy to do sometimes the POC or a small use case, but if you have to scale that up across the enterprise-wide organization, have your system set up to deal with that. For example, data. Is your data structured, unstructured, data lake, how it is organized, where is it residing, is it on-prem, off-prem, how many cloud providers you have. So I think as you start getting into real use cases, I think the organization will start looking at, so to speak, these constraints. And first, I think they will have to fix that. Otherwise, you will not get the benefit of the AI. That is one, I guess. Second, I would say is, for AI, we really have to have a 3-year plan minimum. If you are going to have a crore budget here and another 2 crore budget somewhere else, chances are that that is going to go west. So unless you have a reasonable plan for a 3-year term and wanting to invest and stay with that, you will not get the benefit of AI what you otherwise want to get. Right now there is also a bit of a fear of missing out because the CTOs and CIOs will be asked by the CEOs, what are we doing about AI, Gen AI, and they are compelled to answer something. So I think that's the temptation we got to resist and have a clarity about what do we want to accomplish, which part of our business we think AI will make a difference. I think that thinking needs to be done before you jump into something. But the POCs, the small pilots is absolutely, you got to start something, I get it. But I think eventually it will have to be a mid-term plan for organizations to get some benefits out of it. And one last thing about is, we should not really underestimate the importance of security in this. Mm-hmm. As the data information is being made available everywhere, how do you have a governance around AI? How do you have a security around this? Otherwise, it's a two-edged sword. And we already are seeing some of those in the business and in the market. So when you look at AI, also look at how to secure it, how to make sure that it is secure, and allocate some budget for that as well.
Yes, very true. A few of the conversations which we were having maybe a few weeks back with some of the senior management, a little tech savvy, they were saying that, look, and I'm just borrowing an example of SAP, since we just had SAP gentlemen here in our previous session, that we were on SAP, we're now moving into, say, S4HANA. And around S4HANA, we are building up a huge architecture, because it is not just a pure dependence on S4HANA, because there are multiple such boutique niche software that we are also planning to have. added to that, we also have to think about the cloud, the hybrid, whose cloud, how much hybrid, how much cloud, how much in-premise. On top of that, we also have to think about how to incorporate an enterprise intelligence through the AI. Now, all these things, they're saying that this is a 3-year plan, which we are actually gunning for. The question that we were asking is that do you think the business that you are running, the way the business is being run, forget about this tech part of it. You had an own way of running business, manufacturing, selling, buying, and all that. Keeping that same business model, but putting all this whole, the system architecture of the various things that you're doing, would be able to generate the similar benefits of resilience, agility, optimization, productivity, and all that? Or do you think that the business models itself is calling for a change if you are really wanting to combat uncertainty or create uncertainty in the market? The challenge, and therefore my question to you that he was also mentioning, that look, while tech is definitely giving me an artificial or whatever you call an intelligence, but sometimes to exploit that intelligence, the natural intelligence which we need to innovate the business model and how to use that is lacking. And therefore the management's intelligence to foresee that what could be the structure of the whole business model. I mean, should I be splitting into number of units? Should the organization structure be changed? And that's sometimes where we are also lacking, and therefore a compromised artificial intelligence may be happening because my own natural business intelligence is not going to that level. And that is where they are also saying maybe Japan, maybe America and others are to some extent beating us because the tech is same everywhere. I pause here, your feedback and your reactions to that.
I mean, it's a very broad topic, but I will try to, a little bit share my thoughts in a concise way. I think irrespective of the industry you are working on, there is some basic fundamental technology principles you need to have. But more than ever, I think we all need to keep our respective clients at the center, that what our clients want and what our employees want, because they are another big asset. I mean, whatever Gen AI comes into picture, that's going to help us to take decisions. I don't think, it's not going to replace us to take decisions. Whatever is general in nature, common in nature, will probably get automated, and of course, AI will help. But that what we call a gut feel of taking that decision, that I think that cannot be done unless you have that client intimacy. So I think we will have to look at, in our business model, what part of our organizational structure is base and fundamental and will allow us to scale, and what part of our organizational structure need to be, having a client intimacy. And when I'm saying client, it's not one client, but I think different personalities in the client organization, whether you are dealing with a CFO, whether you're dealing with a CMO, CEO, CXO, whatever you have, right? So I think that's where we will have to just look at how do you structure and use technology. I think we've got to remember that technology has made phenomenal shift, right, in terms of what they can help us with. But I think the decision making ultimately is ours, and that's what I don't think we can substitute that. You talked about the artificial intelligence and the natural intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence can reduce some time for us, but I don't think you can replace the natural intelligence, what I call gut feel here, right?
Yeah, because the competitive differentiation of the competitive edge by deploying maybe millions or billions of dollars in the tech, in creating such a complex system architecture, could only come when my business intelligence is good enough to use it through a proper business model. And that's where sometimes I can see the corporates are having a little challenge, because this could be similar for everyone.
That's right.
The similar thing could be similar for everyone. Any such digital transformation discussion cannot get over with one common question that goes around the country now, that even if we are having a very sweeping transformation, very tech savvy and all, do we really have that kind of competencies and skills in the country, starting from a leadership level to down the level who will actually be getting those things done? Because it seems that the leadership level also needs to be completely changed. The definition of the leadership in this whole neo-normal, digital, AI-driven world needs to be changed. There were a completely different set of competencies even for the board members now, up to the down the line level also. So what's your thought about the competencies that we are now having or harboring in the country?
I think it's a journey for us as a country. We are no different from other countries. Just the other day I came across a AI vibrancy report, and we as a country are number 4th after US, China, I think UK, and then we are 4th. So that's not a bad position to be in. It's evolving. It certainly will take certain time for us to reach to that level. But for sure, I think the awareness is very much here in the business, in the government, in the society, that what got us here is not going to get us there. So we will require a constant rechecking of the skills what we have and what the gap is and how to bridge the gap. I think that's and that is across the levels of organization.
Avinash here, I would pause and now pass on my microphone to the people here. There may be many of your clients, many of your prospects, and getting NTT CEO here could be something that is great for them. So if there are any questions coming from anyone in the audience for him. Okay, so just giving you some time to think about your question. But back to Avinash while they are preparing for a question. Any last words for you on any major challenges in this digital transformation journey that you are seeing or foreseeing will come up?
I would say the clarity of thought, that what do you want to accomplish by doing the digital transformation. I think it's a strategy discussion, it's not a technology discussion. I mean, the technology is there to help you whatever you want to accomplish. But what do you want to accomplish by doing or by going on that journey? I think that's really important for people to think. And most of the time, I think, many of our industry colleagues here are CIOs, CTOs. Their job is not easy because they are expected to simplify this whole thing for the board or for their CA to understand so that they can get the budgets approved for the investment. But I think that purpose and clarity of thought is really important, key.
Thank you, Avinash. I mean, the screen shows that we have no seconds left. I know it's pretty injustice for me to confine your knowledge about this subject within 20 minutes. Interestingly, the last Nobel laureate who got it from that DeepMind's AI, but got in physics, the Geoffrey Hinchman, after the Nobel, he was asked by a journalist that, sir, could you tell me in 20 minutes, what exactly is your work on, the self-learning concept of the neural network, what exactly is your Nobel on? And he said, how much time do you have? The journalist said, 15 minutes, sir. So he said, if I could have done it in 15 minutes, possibly I would not have got the Nobel. So it's the same thing for you. I feel it really bad to confine you with the 20 minutes, but thank you. It's really a wonderful
experience. My pleasure. And thank you, audience, for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Ambarish Dasgupta and Mr. Avinash Joshi. May I request Mr. Suman Banerjee, Chief Human Resource Officer, ABP Private Limited, to kindly come forward and present a memento to both our speakers of this fireside chat. Thank you very much, Mr. Avinash Joshi, for this very interesting sharing of thoughts that you did. And thank you, Mr. Ambarish Dasgupta, for initiating this fireside chat. Thank you very much, sir. I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, all of you will have something to take back. Thank you very much, sirs. We'll request you to take your seats in the auditorium. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll just take a minute to do the setup. And we have this interesting leadership keynote. This is getting very, very interesting because, as I can see, we have a lot of leadership keynotes. And leadership is the word that we need to look at, because each one of us here, we are leaders in our own domain, and each one of us, we wish to do more. And if you, up to now, you have understood what we are doing, we need to unlearn, and we need to accept the change that is coming to us. So I would now like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Suprakash Chaudhary. He's the Country Head Digital Industries, Siemens Limited. May I request you, sir, to kindly come onto the stage and take over. And a huge round of applause. The applauses should keep coming because here is Mr. Suprakash Chaudhary to share his views. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I know I'm standing between all of you and lunch, so I try to keep the session on time. So firstly, I'm very excited to be back here, back in this city. 3 reasons. First, I belong to this city, of course. Was born here. Of course, having living in Mumbai for the last 30 years, but this always has a special place in my heart. Second, INFOCOM, as they say, is the pilgrimage for technologists in this side of the country. So how can you not be in an event like this? We started participating about 5 years back, and we would like to continue our association with this great platform. And the third one is very interesting, and I'm sure a little bit of an anecdote. I'll take you back to 1868. 1868, the time taken for sending information from Calcutta, which was at that time Calcutta and not Kolkata, by the East India Company to their headquarters was 30 days, about, to be precise, 28 days. And they wanted to bring this down because this was not efficient, this was not effective, it was not allowing them the right control they needed. And they said, they wanted to set up a telegraph line which could communicate between headquarters and the East India Company, the British Empire here, much faster. This was year 1868, and that was the first telegraph line that was being set up between Calcutta and India, and the company that did that was Siemens. So it's a long history that the company shares with the country and with the city, and I guess suffices to say over this last 156 years in India and 176 years globally, we've gone through a fair amount of different kinds of disruption that has happened in the industry. And that may be a little bit of a clue as to why I am sharing this stage with a lot of people who are technology gurus, who are talking about digital, data, AI and all of that. And what has this company, which has got to do with real hardware, making real products in this forum. So we've gone through our fair share of disruptions, and I thought that is probably a reason why Khalida thought it could be a good session and good experience for me to share a few thoughts. Can I have the clicker, please? Can I have the clicker? Thank you. So I think I will not spend a lot of time on this because, I'm sure all of you are already aware, but to suffice to say that digital disruption, the most, let's say, prolific disruption that we are all seeing today, it's all pervasive, it's across all industries, different forces, whether it's the mobile, whether it's the cloud, whether it's digital platforms and marketplaces, whether it's big data, AI, automation, everything is disrupting multiple industries. And you're seeing this in India, you're seeing this globally. So it is a force, in our opinion, that we all need to understand and deal with in our own contexts. But very clearly it's disrupting everything that we are doing. So in our opinion, as I said, disruption is no longer a choice, but it's the status quo. And resilience as an organization is what we need to deliver, whether it's long-term growth and be relevant to the industry and relevant to the market and relevant to our customers. So if disruption is status quo, what we believe when we deal with actual making of real goods, products and services, that sustainability could become a key differentiator for organizations in this world of digital disruption. And it's not surprising that whether it is our CEO, if you look at 80% of CEOs advocate that, they talk about a large part of their customers demanding it, and very interestingly, talent, people, are especially the new generation, are very, very keen to join companies who have a sustainability agenda. And if you look at it, the sustainability shift and the implications and the impact on the market, you can already see. If you see today, there are already organizations who are committing to net zero targets. They're talking about reduction, etc. We are already fighting for resources which are very, very scarce. Capital is flowing towards organizations which have a clear, roadmap for sustainability. And finally, customers are demanding it, especially the new generation, especially the younger generation, are very, very keen, and they look at this as an agenda item when they want to make purchasing decisions. So it's not just about talent, it's not just about the need to do it, it's also about customers demanding it, talent wanting to join organizations, resources being scarce, so this is something which is an agenda which needs to be driven across organizations. And of course, these have significant implications. And what we need to do? We need to become more energy efficient as an organization, because at the end of the day, we could have digital roadmaps, we could have use cases on Gen AI, etc. But at the end of the day, every organization either is making a real product or providing a real service to a customer. So in our operations, in all of our operations, we need to become as much energy efficient as possible, because that's a scarce resource, and that will become a key determinant not just for organizations, but for continents, and they will fight for it. It's also about decarbonizing, because that's, again, if you see, whether we like it or not, that's something that governments across the world, corporations across the world, society at large is going to drive. It's about how do we make ourselves more resource efficient, whether it's in terms of people, whether it's in terms of capital, whether it's in terms of raw material, what have you. So how do we drive more resource efficiency and circularity in our whole organizations, in our whole industries? It's also about being people-centric. It's not enough to do all the other things if we are not worried about the health, safety of our own employees as well as our other stakeholders. And finally, it's about bringing this all together to continuously innovate, be flexible and adaptable to business changes that are happening. Now, if you look at technology, it's been enabling a lot of these activities that we do, whether it's in terms of using automation to bring down energy requirements in either infrastructure or industry, whether it's in terms of using technology to use resources more efficiently, right from the design phase of a new product, where it's not like you start looking at circularity afterwards, but how do you embed the concept of circularity and the materials that you use right at the initiation, right at the time when you are designing a new product. So it's as much about circularity, how do I bring efficiency in my supply chain, How do I near-shore operations? How do I do a complete supplier strategy? So a lot of these things go into bringing down, making resource efficiency and circularity is a top agenda. And finally, it's about, as I said, about people, society, and the societal impact that we have not only on our own people, but also on our on the employees, partners, other stakeholders that we operate with. And technology is just an enabler, but these are thoughts, these are design principles that we need to embed in our entire value chain. Now, while we talk a lot about sustainability from the lens of economic incentives and economic benefits, I think the big disruption is happening when this new sustainable ways of thinking are actually democratizing the industry. We are seeing very different types of organizations who are coming in and who are challenging the way things have been done, who are really challenging the status quo. And I thought I'll share a few examples of you here where it's driven by economics, all right, but it's driven by a much bigger social and a societal impact, and thereby completely disrupting the way we think under normal circumstances. So let me give you the first example. This is a company called 80 Acres Farms, and some of these companies we are working with, so we are privy to some of the details. 80 Acres Farms is they set up a indoor vertical farming setup somewhere in the US. As they started prototyping and piloting, they realized that there is a huge need for all the things, the technologies that I talked about, the software, the crop protection, the crop growing predictions, automation, environmental controls, etc., to really help them scale. It was good to do it at one place, but if you had to really scale at an industrial grade, they needed all these technologies. So what they did was build a digital twin of the plant growing, the digital twin of the farm. And thereby, they could control the light, the environmental conditions, the humidity, etc., that went to these plants in their vertical farms. Thereby, they were able to produce produce 100% insecticide-free, and increase crop cycles by 17 to 20 times in a year, thereby generating 300 times as much food grown per square feet. So it's a very, very unconventional thinking. They are, and this is probably going to be a significant need of the hour as as the industry grows, as the population grows, and as we have to cater to healthy food made locally available. So this was one example. The other example that I would like to talk about is a company called Unlimited Tomorrow. They're in the business of manufacturing prosthetic limbs for children and adults. A prosthetic limb takes, if developing a prosthetic limb takes almost more than a year, and it is more often than not, it can be rarely fitted correctly in the limb where it's required, and hence it provides a lot of discomfort to the user. And finally, it's very expensive, so it cannot be used by everybody. So the whole idea was, how do I democratize it? How do I make it faster? How do I speed it up? Again, the same concept. They used digital technologies, they used artificial intelligence and the digital twin technology to start modeling the individual limb of the patient. Rather than making something generic, it was modeling the exact requirement of the patient, and the one who needed it, made it, and then they actually 3D printed it. What actually transpired is a prosthetic limb in the US would cost about $80,000, came down to $8,000. A limb typically took about, as I said, a year to develop came down to a month. And finally, it weighed each of these limbs, which originally weighed about 4 pounds, came down to a pound. So made it much more comfortable for the actual user. So very, very different application, but has huge societal impact and making people more inclusive in what we are trying to do. And the last was BioNTech. Again, a startup in Germany, very small company, got into COVID vaccine development and used all these technologies that I talked about, as you know, to cut down drastically on their whole development cycle, at the same time managing the energy, requirements that they had, as well as, as they scaled up into industrial production, they could set it up at, almost 7 months less than a year that it would normally take. So again, these are technologies digital technologies, AI, data, etc., the examples and all these technologies that you heard since the morning, which are being used for actual real production, real goods. And I'm just trying to bring to light the fact that all of these new disruptions, all of these digital know-hows that we have today are actually democratizing the industry. There are very small players, there are very, very niche players who are coming with solutions, who are coming with products that we had not even envisaged. Finally, it's also about capital. A large Indian private bank that we worked with has also, they've not only made their own operations energy neutral, carbon neutral by 2021, actually they are driving, they're in the forefront of driving capital towards projects, towards companies who are making sustainable products. Today, 23% of their business already comes from financing projects and companies which are driving towards sustainability. So as I said, capital is flowing towards companies which want to be sustainable, which want to remain sustainable, and that's where technologies and digital technologies can help you. And finally, I would like to end with a final example from my own company. This is a before-after 1960 and 2023 picture of our oldest plant in India. This is on the outskirts of Mumbai, in a place called Kalwa. This plant was being in 2014. It was on the verge of being closed down, because it was not profitable, it was not producing the goods of the right quality, and the complete, if you had to kind of bring it down and rebuild the entire plant, it was far more expensive. It didn't make a business case. And that's when we started experimenting with what we could do with digital technologies, that we talked to our customers, we worked with our customers, we brought it home. This plant produced about 1.1 million pieces of electronic switchgear in a year. By using the various technologies, especially the digital twin of the plant and the product, and bringing it together, we could increase the productivity from 1.1 million to 1.4 million pieces per year. That's not also 35% increase in productivity, but more importantly, there were 77 variants that was being produced in 3 lines. What changed after this whole, let's say, repurposing of the plant is that we now produce 300 different variants in 1 line, and which helps us deliver not only products in India, but also products outside, products in the Southeast Asian markets, which was very essential for the economics of the plant to be viable. Third, there was a product coming out in 21 seconds, came down to 9 seconds. We're talking about 66 quality checks, which took 60 seconds. Now we are doing 223 quality checks in 9 seconds. So real-time quality check. It's not being stacked at the end of the line, but real-time quality checks. So it has helped us not only being more productive, not only being more flexible, but also deliver much higher variable products and volume, and hence justify the existence of this plant. So it was not just about doing something fancy with digital, but it was actually, you know, making a plant which had become completely economically unviable into a plant which even stands today and actually thrives and flourishes. Finally, I'd like to end with a story. This was 2008. This is a story which I picked up from a book called The Barefoot Coach by Paddy Upton. For all of you who know him, he was the mental conditioning coach for the Indian cricket team. When he and Gary Kirsten joined in 2008, there were two teams, of course, the test team and the one-day team, and the test team was captained by Anil Kumble at those days, and the one-day team was captained by MS Dhoni. As usual, as many of you know, the Indian team was not really known for its standards of discipline. People would walk in late for practices, people would walk in late for team meetings, and they needed to fix this. The practice at that time was that it was a very participative decision making. So they asked the teams that should there be a consequence for coming late? And the entire team said yes, there should be a consequence for coming late, but they couldn't agree what that consequence was. So they said leave it to the captain and the management to decide what the consequence will be. So when they asked Anil Kumble what the consequence should be, he said, very simple, whoever comes late for practice or team meetings pays 10,000 rupees as fine. Okay, good. And then they asked in the evening MS Dhoni as to what should be the consequence, should there be a consequence? He said, absolutely there should be a consequence for people coming late. So what should be the consequence, MSD? And he replied, that if anybody comes late in a training session or a practice, then the entire team must pay 10,000 rupees. So ladies and gentlemen, sustainability is not just an economic initiative today, it's a social priority and a moral obligation as well. So I think it's not about whether I do it or somebody else doesn't do it. I think the time has come when all of us need to embrace it and focus on sustainability as an equally important agenda in our day-to-day business as well as our strategic thinking. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, sir. We request you to kindly remain on stage, and I will request Mr. Uman Thomas, National Head, Advertisement Sales of ABP Private Limited, to kindly come forward and present a memento to Mr. Suprakash Chaudhary. Thank you very much, sir, for those valuable learnings that you have shared with us. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for lunch. I will request all of you to please return to the hall by 2:15 so that we can resume with the next part of the afternoon. I request all of you to enjoy your lunch, but also be back on time. Thank you very much, and please enjoy your lunch.